Good morning. I think we are now live streaming on YouTube, and I want to welcome everybody to the resumption of DTA negotiations, and I want to welcome our guests, the CSEA members of the CSEA bargaining team, the Classified Association bargaining team, and we're going to start this morning's meetings with this joint group hearing a presentation on the current state of the budget from Susie DeYoung, our Chief Financial Officer, and Chris Godowski, our Superintendent. So I will throw it over to you, Chris. Good morning.
Thank you, Mila. Good morning. So I just wanted to share out of the gate that some of you, many of you have probably seen versions of this presentation before. Depending on which time you were part of the group, what you saw may have been different, at least in terms of tone, sometimes in terms of content. So the first presentation that we did in the space was one before the governor's executive order allocating $510 million to K-12. And there was a lot of heaviness in every room I was part of when we would go through that presentation, because there were huge red numbers at the bottom of every page in any scenario that you would model. Then the governor made that executive order, and I think as we went through presentations from there was a lot more optimism about being able to manage this without cuts in our system and with some fairly modest changes around compensation, other parts of our system. And then more recently, over the last week to 10 days, we've been in a spot of working with colleagues in other districts trying to get greater clarity about what we can use the $18.9 million that we were allocated in that executive order, what we can use it for. A lot of what folks had first gravitated toward, which is just trying to use that money to offset reductions that will otherwise happen under School Finance Act for next year. A lot of the early indications back from auditors and from various state level officials is that not so fast, not so easy. And so we're still trying to figure out how to use those dollars. So that's just a preface to what Susie will walk us through, but it is a little bit of an up and down. I remain optimistic that in the end, the state and federal officials will give us the authority we need to mitigate large cuts to our system, and that we can put this money to good use to serve kids next year. But there's still a few unknowns, big unknowns around how we can use that. With that, I'm going to pass the baton to Susie.
Good morning, everybody. I don't know who the host is, but if you would allow me to share my screen so that I can do the presentation, that'd be great.
Roddy, can you help us with that? Or Chad?
Matt Havlin, I like that grandfather clock in the background, very classy.
Hey, Roddy or Chad, would you be able to help us with the screen sharing for Susie?
Susie, please try the screen sharing now.
Perfect, thank you very much. Okay. All right, we're going to go through the slide deck, the presentation that we did last week, also for the Board of Education, same slide deck. So at this point, we are presenting a proposed budget. There are a lot of unknowns, but actually we are required by state statute to present this proposed budget at least 30 days prior to the beginning of the next fiscal year. As Chris mentioned, we do have some concerns in regards to the restrictions on the CARES CRF, the Coronavirus Relief Funds. So we've got two sets of funds from the CARES Act. It's going to be the CARES ESSER funds, which was about $3.6 million that was allocated to us, and the CARES CRF funds, which in total about $20.9 million was allocated to us. And after allocations to our charter schools, we'd be looking at about $18.9 million for district managed schools. The biggest concern that we have right now in regards to the ability to spend these funds is based on guidance that we've received from our auditors, as well as other districts have received from their auditors, and it's that third bullet point. So expenditures for these funds cannot be accounted for in a budget as of March 27th, 2020. So any staff that was in our budget as of March 27th, 2020, it becomes a little bit more difficult to use those funds to offset revenue shortfalls for existing staff. But as Chris mentioned, we are still waiting for some further guidance. We're hoping for some loosening of those restrictions, maybe some waivers from the federal government and/or some other guidance from the governor. I will note that throughout this presentation, the proposed budget assumes both best case scenario that the CRF funds are going to be allowed to mitigate the impact on the school finance reduction. The other thing that you might have seen recently in the news is the concern in regards to the impact of property taxes in Gallagher and the reduction of the assessment rate from 7.15 down to 5.88, which could have an impact of up to $490 million potentially on school finance total program. This presentation also assumes that the state will backfill any shortfalls associated with a loss of property tax collections with that change. We do not have alternative scenarios run at this point for the property tax adjustment, but alternative scenarios for without the CRF funds will begin on slide 15. I think we've had a conversation with this group previously, so I won't spend too much time on this, but not much has changed. There was a $3.3 billion shortfall that the state is having to account for. That was for both a shortfall in both fiscal year 19-20 as well as fiscal year 2021. And we anticipate that this shortfall in revenue is going to continue on in future years. And we have modeled those impacts in future years in this presentation as well. So in addition to the revenue shortfall, Adams 12 is a declining enrollment district. So as we look at this, we're declining enrollment from the last projections. We are looking at declining enrollment over the next 5 years. It starts to even out starting with fiscal year 22-23. But as you'll notice here, as we've talked previously, 19-20, we have a reduction of about 680 students with 3-year averaging. We will only have a shortfall of 253 funded pupils. The projection for, I'm sorry, that was for 2021, we will have an estimated 680. With 3-year projections, we will only see 257 in funded pupils on averaging. And in fiscal year 21-22, there's an estimated 534 FTE reduction, and we will not also be seeing any sort of benefit in regards to averaging at that point. So we'll start seeing full reductions in our per pupil count by the time we get to 22-23. I will note that these projections were done as of November or actually they were updated in February of 2020. They do not take into account any impact that we might see because of the COVID-19 pandemic and families' changes in their educational choices. Nor do we fully, the projection, the planning team with Matt Schaefer, you know, he has good out-year projections, but he does modify those every year. So our best numbers at this point are really where we're looking at our fiscal year 2021 estimate. Definitely our 21-22 and our fiscal year 22-23 student counts will adjust accordingly. So what does this mean in future years for our revenue, both with the shortfall at the state level and our declining enrollment? So based off of the numbers we have right now, we anticipate the school finance formula, the negative factor or the cost of living factor to reduce total program by a total of $577 million. I say either one of those because conversations have been had with both of those factors potentially being impacted. At this point, school finance legislation has not been introduced yet. And due to the delay of the return of the legislature, we don't expect to see that legislation until later this week. We are also assuming a reduction in funding as compared to this fiscal year in 21-22. And then at this point, we are modeling flat funding. So by 22-23, it would be the same per pupil revenue as what is happening in fiscal year 19-20. In addition to the revenue reductions, each year we do look at our expenditures, both increases in expenditures as well as decreases in expenditures. So we've noted this list has not changed dramatically since the last time we did get together to go through a presentation previously. The 4.6 million in step-and-step equivalent is in here. And actually everything on the increases totaling $9.3 million is exactly the same. A couple differences in regards to the decreases. First of all, in the last presentation at that time, we were going off of potential changes to para based off of some recommendations that were presented to the Joint Budget Committee. At this point, the only changes that have been completed for the para in fiscal year 2021 is the delay or the suspension of the $225 million transfer from the state to para. Things that we had discussed before about potentially transferring some employer costs to the employee have not come to fruition. At the same time, there was no changes to the auto adjust that will occur for both employer at 0.5% and employee at 0.5%. And in addition, employees will also see an increased contribution to para of the 0.75% based off of existing legislation. So the total increase in employee contributions to para in fiscal year starting July 1, so fiscal year 2021, will be 1.25%. That's a total contribution of 10%. Compared to this fiscal year's 8.75. Difference being is those increases, those contributions do go directly into the employee's account. whereas when prior legislation, when it had increases in AED or SAED, those did go to holding up para and decreasing the unfunded liability. The other change that has been added in on this slide that was not on the previous one is the district does have a central department budget that handles multiple salary and benefit items. For example, the retirement stipends, the payouts are budgeted in there. Any other negotiated stipends are also budgeted in there at the time of the adopted. And other salary increases once those are negotiated. What we did find from doing a zero-based budget on this specific department is that where there was some duplicates associated with the salary increases in 5C. And so we were able to back out $3.5 million of expenses that we had previously been budgeting for, because they were duplicated in both the general fund and in that mill levy override budget as well. We also, this fund balance slide is also very similar to the last one. The numbers have not changed. We have not updated, or we have not changed our forecast for the year ending fiscal year June 2019-2020. Still have our Tabor reserve cash funded, still have those two other options of both a line of credit or collateralizing buildings and creating an emergency reserve. And based off of feedback that we've received in regards to existing staff that will be taking in new staff that will be added at the end of fiscal year 19-20 into fiscal year 2021 payments we do not anticipate the years 2 through 5 longevity stipend reserve changing, going either up or down. So again, when we look at the fund balance, one-time funds available at the district level, $27.8 million. This is going to include both unassigned fund balance we anticipate at the end of this year, central departments and school operating budget pullbacks from this fiscal year. So reducing budgets from fiscal year 19-20 operating budgets. Using some of the reserves in the 5C programs that we do not believe we'll need those additional dollars to maintain the program in the long run. And also that interest earnings on the bond redemption fund balance. So our biggest concern, as I noted before, we've got two different allocations of funds, the ESSER CARES Act funding, as well as the CRF CARES Act funding. Our biggest concern is being able to the uses available for the $18.9 million. To date, we have spent about $1.1 million on COVID expenses, inclusive of meals, technology, hardware and software that's been installed, as well as additional help desk staff for families. Those will be covered out of those funds. They've been covered in the current budget. So we will be able to allocate at least those dollars to these so that we would use that amount for future years. It would add into the fund balance. You'll notice on the other slide, we'd had an additional about $400,000 for nursing staff. We do know that those dollars, those expenses would be allowed to be covered by these one-time CRF funds as well. It's going to be the remaining expenditures that we have that we're also looking for some relief on. When we look at the expense budget by object, I believe these numbers have changed slightly since the last time we met, most of that being in that salaries and benefits once we found that duplicate and made that adjustment. The salaries and benefits is at 318.5 million, or slightly over 91%. And the rest of those assumptions have remained static in regards to the other line items on the expenses by object. So when we look at what our budget balancing is for the next 3 fiscal years, making the assumptions in regards to the 8% reduction in revenue year over year for fiscal year 2021, the 5% reduction for fiscal year 21-22, and flat funding compared to this fiscal year for 22-23. We would, if capable of using the one-time funds, the entire $18.9 million, we would be able to balance next fiscal year's budget with all of that one-time federal funds, as well as an additional $1.4 million of district managed funds. We'll note that this slide does assume the salary increase, the ongoing increase of the $4.6 million. By fiscal year 21-22, we would have a $9.2 million shortfall. And in these out years, 21-22 and 22-23, we also assume salary increases on all of those years. And by 22-23, the shortfall is $4.9 million. If we look at the same revenue, but do not assume salary increases across the board for all groups, we would still be able to balance the fiscal year 2021 budget, assuming we can use all of the federal funds, with $19.3 million of federal funds, leaving $3.2 million available to help balance the budget in fiscal year 21-22. But we would be using, of the $27.8 million, we would be using $22.2 million of district one-time funds by the end of fiscal year 22-23, and still have $1.4 million of budget balancing and $300,000 of budget balancing in 22-23. I will note that the majority of the expenses in here are recurring expenses, and we are backfilling those with one-time funds. So without one-time funds in the following fiscal year, that larger negative, that red number will be much larger as a negative. So what are some of our budget balancing options? I think a couple of these are very similar. The furlough days is for each day that every single employee takes a furlough day is $1.4 million. A 1% salary reduction is 2.7. And we are going back, preliminary estimates on total, a 15% reduction in total operating budgets is 3.3 million. We do have other department managers looking at their budgets to make sure that we did not include items that they feel are not able to be reduced. So there is the potential that this $3.3 million could be less. So 3.3 is the highest amount available to help do any sort of budget balancing. With the proposed budget, we do have to show all funds, and this was a slide that explained what all of the other funds are. So what are some of the next steps in all our alternative scenarios? So we are waiting for School Finance Act legislation to be introduced, as well as further guidance on those coronavirus relief funds. Without further guidance or further lessening of the restrictions. In fiscal year 2021, if we cannot use that $18.9 million, and this is worst case scenario, this does not assume, as I spoke earlier in regards to the $1.1 million that we'd already accounted for in this year's budget that we could offset with those funds, as well as the $400,000 in nursing. So we're going from best case to worst case. This assumes not being able to use any of the $18.9 million. In that case, we would use all of the $3.6 million in the ESSER funds in fiscal year 2021, and our funding gap would be $9.2 million. There would be no additional federal funds available by fiscal year 21-22. So we would have another $9.2 million. And by 22-23, we'd be looking at a $10.4 million shortfall. I will note that in this scenario, it does include the salary increases, the $4.6 million in each fiscal year. And we will have used 100% of the $27.8 million in district fund balance. Basically, the only difference in this scenario is not including the step and step equivalent in the forward fiscal, assuming in fiscal year 2021, we would not give a step and step equivalent. That being backed out, future fiscal years would be looking at salary increases, and we still would be having using 100% of the one-time fund balance dollars that the district has. And we'd still be looking at anywhere from $4.6 to $5.8 million in budget balancing that we would need to do. So what is the current thoughts on the priorities for budget balancing, the resources that we have in order of recommended priority? First, our hope is that priority one, we would be using 100% of those CRF funds. As a reminder, those funds do have to be used for expenditures through December 30th of 2020. So we would be looking to use those in the first 6 months of the next fiscal year. Then we would move on to the ESSER federal funds, then to the district unassigned fund balance. We then look at reductions in the school and department operating budgets. As we noted, that current estimate or preliminary estimate is about $3.3 million. Then moving to salary freezes or salary reductions. And finally, any sort of potential reductions in staffing, programming, and services, but they would all be aligned with both the requirements of the Board of Education as well as Elevate. And those decisions we would be looking at after having further guidance on the CRF. So those proposed reductions we would be determining in this month, since it's now June 1st. The financial statements are available on the district's website for all of the funds, as if anyone's interested. And that is the entire presentation.
So does anybody have any questions for Susie? We can start there, and then I may just add a comment or two before transitioning to whatever we have next.
So if you do have questions, I'd ask you to put your hand up in your in the participants box, please. So go ahead, Chris. Dorman.
When might we know, when might we get more guidance from the state on the CARES funds?
So I don't know for sure on the when. I will tell you that there are multiple groups of people that are really pushing this. I know also that CFOs got together again this weekend to find others that we believe would be able to help us push that guidance forward and get some additional. So nobody's really being quiet about it. There's a lot of folks that are asking for help right now.
Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you have some comments you wanted to make before the questions, or do you want to wait for the questions first?
I can just jump in here and then go on to questions.
Okay.
I mean, Dorman's question relates to one of the big unknowns right now that we've got to get nailed down sooner rather than later. And that's how much of the 18.9 million can we use and for which purposes. We need to figure that out this week is my belief. If for some reason it's still in limbo, then I think we've got to evaluate where we stand in this process, because $18.9 million has a big impact about the trade-offs and the evaluation of the budget that we're all doing. The second piece relates to reserves, and just wanted to say that the 40% recommendation, the $11.1 million of fund balance use, depending on where we stand, that's another piece that the Board of Education is grappling with, and will be giving us some definitive feedback in the next 2 meetings on that piece. And I think on that part, the $27.8 million, as we said, 11.1 million is 40% of that. There's other ways you can look at reserves. If you start to add in things like Tabor and the 3% board discretionary reserve, then the 11.1 million is about 24% of our total reserves. And I think the board and all of us are looking at what's the right access so that you don't hit a huge cliff if this challenge persists for a long, long time. So just know that the board's working on that piece too. And once we have those two parts of the equation nailed down, then I think we've got a much better sense of where we stand in terms of solving the broader budget.
Okay, Kathy.
Yeah, I just had a question for Susie. So I think the thing that in the assumptions that I have most questions about is the flat funding assumption in 22-23. Is that based on certain projections? And my information is coming from the historical data that they used for the last recession, and that some of those biggest cuts took place in years 3, even 4 and 5. So that's where a lot of my hesitation comes. And I didn't know if you were looking at numbers from the governor or where you were getting that assessment that we could be at flat funding by 22-23.
So a couple things. One, there are no, the forecasts going out do not discuss 22-23 and what they believe. They do know that this recovery is definitely estimated to be different than the last recession because of what caused these loss of funds. So in a best case scenario, because I have no other data, the assumption is flat funding. So that's where the flat funding comes from, without a void of good additional information for that fiscal year. I did flat.
Thank you.
Other questions? Other questions, sorry.
Dave, I can't raise my hand, but my question is less of a technical question and just, similar to last time, if Susie could share the slides with Mila so she could get it out to all the invitees, just so that we could have a hard copy of that story.
Sure. This is also posted as required also on the district's website. So others that need it as well, it's there too. But I will definitely share that.
Other questions?
Any questions from our CSEA colleagues who are joining us for this portion of the meeting? Anything you guys are wondering? as Chris said, given the uncertainties, we're scheduled CSEA friends to meet June 10th and 11th. If for some reason we don't have enough information to start making making decisions, we will likely have to push the meetings for this IBS committee that are scheduled next week on the 8th and 9th, as well as our CSEA scheduled meetings on the 10th and 11th back. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted, but we're in a time of uncertainty, so it's hard to zero in on exactly what we'll be able to know and when.
Any other questions for Susie, Chris, Mila, anybody?
Okay, well, hearing none, I want to thank the team members from the CSEA group for joining us for this. And I would suggest that you could get on with your morning and the other tasks that are waiting you. And the IBS team, stay put, and we'll do our check-in and get going with our scheduled meeting. We'll give everybody a wave goodbye. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Mila, do you want to take 5 or 10 minutes while they jump off and then come back, or do you want to just get right into it?
Well, I think we could get right into it. Anybody
Okay.
need a break or?
I think we get going.
Yeah, okay. So, Jim, were you able to get on with us this morning? I know you were having some trouble logging in.
I did have trouble and I did get on, so thank you very much. I apologize for that.
Excellent. All right. Well, throwing it to you guys to take us through a check-in.
All right, so let's go with who are you, position in district, how are you, time constraints, issues or elephants, expectations, and then just talk about an event that happened in your life that made a positive difference. So let's start with Deborah.
Well, that was unexpected. Hi, I'm Deborah Blake, special education teacher at Arapahoe Ridge Elementary School. I am doing well today. I do have one time constraint. I do need to step out for just a little bit, probably sometime around 10 o'clock, but it'll only be for an hour or less, and then I will be back. Thanks, Sandy, because I forgot where I was. No issues or elephants. Expectations is to begin what looks to be like a pretty heavy process. And hopefully we can get through it as respectfully and as painlessly as possible. Something that had a positive impact. I participated in the protests yesterday with my sister and I'm going to backtrack. My daughter came home and surprised me for a visit. So that was lovely. For those of you that remember, she's an RN in an ICU hospital. And so since all of this has started, this is the first chance I've had to see her. So my heart is rather full. And in addition to that, we participated with her and my niece in the protests. So it's been kind of a sadly positive experience.
Shelley.
Good morning. I'm Michelle DeRock. I teach 3rd grade at Meridian Elementary. I'm doing well. Had an enjoyable, relaxing weekend. I have no issues or elephants. My expectations are that we will continue good work in this phase 2. And an event that had a positive impact on me, the first thing that came to mind was my mom was very ill when I was growing up, and I have 3 siblings, and it just taught us a lot of independence and perseverance, and just kind of helped shape who we are as adults.
Heather Espinoza.
Morning, Heather. I teach second grade at Wood Glen. I am okay today. No issues or elephants. Expectations is continuing to do the good work that we do here. And an event that had a positive experience. We adopted a puppy. And so seeing the smiles and the excitement in my children's face was positive and good. So I think as soon as he's trained, I'll like him better, but we're getting there.
Bo.
Good morning, everyone. Bo Fobert. I serve the district as Executive Director of Curriculum and Instruction. I'm doing great today. Expectations are that we continue to do good work as a team, listen well, bring our best selves forward. Positive event for me, probably what comes to mind, mid-90s, first job out of college, went to work in the Bay Area of California with a small consulting firm that specialized in helping school districts, library districts, fire districts, etc., pass mill levies and bonds. At that time in California, you needed a supermajority of 66% to successfully pass those. And during that time, I met some of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And at that time, I had no intention on a career in education, but it was through that experience that I was really drawn to the people I saw serving in education. So that would, given 25 years later, I think I'd have to consider that a pretty significant event in my life.
Colleen.
Colleen Gardner, sixth grade math teacher, Shutteridge Middle School. I'm tired today because I've been sleeping in every morning since we got out of school. Only time constraint I really have has to do with my Wi-Fi because I'm out at Lake McConaughey getting our lake place ready. And as long as my phone holds up, I will be here with you. If it fades or my connection goes, then I'm going to have to figure out a different way to join you. I have no interests or issues or elephants. There are like so many events that made a difference in my life, but one of them was I started working at Fort Morgan, March 1992, and I got tired of driving from Denver to there, and I was driving down I-25 and I saw the Adams 12 sign there at the old ESC. And I was like, hey, maybe I could go apply there. And I went and got the application, and 28 years later, here I am.
Chris.
I'm Chris, superintendent. I'm doing good today. I took a walk this morning with the dog, saw a number of roly-polies on the pathway, and there's nothing like a roly-poly to make you feel like a 7-year-old and feel like everything's right in the world. Just been smiling about that all day long. No issues or elephants. Expectations is that we continue to listen and dig in and learn about some of the committee work and other pieces of this equation that we've got to solve. And in terms of an event that changed my life, many of you have heard me talk about this before, but I had a cousin her senior year of high school 18 years ago who was diagnosed with leukemia, was at Children's Hospital, prompted me to run a marathon to raise money for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. And in the midst of that, met my wife, which has definitely changed my life in dramatic ways. So sometimes out of really difficult things, there can be a silver lining that emerges for sure.
Heather Grecius.
Good morning, Heather Grecius. What do I do? The director of Student Services in Adams 12 for elementary. I'm good today. Apparently not, haven't had enough coffee. No issues or elephants. My expectations are that we'll just do the great work that we do every time we get together. Event that had a positive impact. I started my career in Sheridan School District and lived up here. So it was quite a long drive to get to work every day. And I decided I wanted something closer to home. And so I met Michelle Kelly, who was a coordinator and assistant director and director here in Adams 12. And she kind of took me around the district, and I landed at Westlake Middle School and have been here ever since. So it was a good choice to move up.
Dorman.
Hello, my name's Dorman Land. I am a teacher at Century Middle School. I'm a little bit stinky today, but you won't know that. I had to douse the campfire, come out of the wilderness, find some cell signal to get on the meeting. I have no issues or elephants. I have great expectations. I know we have great challenges. but this group is of the highest quality, and we'll meet those challenges for our students. Positive impacts. For me, they always tend to be the smallest of things, a word or a sentence, something that someone says. But I remember at North Bend Middle School was hiring, and for teachers, and I wanted a job in Adams 12, and they didn't pull my. They were going through interviews. I knew they were going through interviews, and they hadn't pulled my application that I'd put in at DSC. So I said, "What the heck? I want to work there." So I just walked in and threw my resume on the counter. The secretary said, "Well, they already." I said, "Well, just give it to the principal. You know, I'm just very interested in working here at North Glen Middle School." Don Wheatlake was the assistant principal at that time. And he said, "Someone actually came in and said they wanted to work here." So, I mean, he loved his school, don't get me wrong, but everybody else had just left it up to chance. So they gave me an interview, and that's how I got my job at Adams 12, and here I am. So that's a very, very positive experience for me.
Nancy.
Good morning, Nancy Leonard, retired principal. I'm doing fine. I don't have any time constraints, no issues or elephants, and I expect we're going to continue to do good work as we always do. I think the major thing that happened in my life was surviving double pulmonary embolisms. And what that created for me was a lot of great new healthy habits.
Laura Leppy.
Good morning. I'm Laura Leppy. I teach middle school math at Hallstrom. I, like many of the other folks, am a little bit tired and maybe a little stinky. I showered like a week ago, I think. But I'm just kidding. I showered yesterday. But I'm tired because I've been sleeping in too. And this was the first weekend I didn't have anything to do. So it was amazing. I have no issues or elephants or time constraints. I'm all ears all morning. My expectations are that we are going to, I already learned things this morning. So my expectations are that we're going to do great things with the new knowledge that we have and such. And an event that had a positive impact was kind of in passing. It was my senior year of high school, and I was talking to my AP Calc teacher. She had spilled orange juice on the photo print that I had made her, and so I had to go in and redo it for her. We were just chit-chatting, and she asked me what I was going to do in college. I said I was going to major in communications, and she said, "Oh, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe teach, maybe have my summers off, maybe do something in math." And she said, "Well, if you want to teach math, you have to be a math major." And so I switched in college to be a math major, and that was the end of it. And it was about 30 seconds worth of a conversation and changed the entire course of my life. So that was my positive impact.
Dave Lockley.
Good morning. I'm Dave Lockley, president of the District 12 Educators Association. Doing well this morning. I have little children, so I don't know what you people are talking about sleeping in. We're up and going before 6 a.m. every morning in the Lockley household, so I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. Doing well this morning. I don't have any issues or elephants. Same expectations as everyone else. I was struggling up with something to say, not because of not having anything to say, but trying to pick a thing to say. And so the thing that I would just talk about, so I was in high school on 9/11, and it was a very scary time for everybody in America. Me in particular, my family. So I come from a big family. And at the time, 3 of my brothers were in the service, one of which had been deployed, was being deployed to what would be the invasion of Iraq, and the other one was already in Afghanistan. And I was trying to do the senior thing of picking what to do with the rest of my life. And I had a English teacher of mine pull me aside and say, "Don't do something because you think it's what other people want you to do or what you should do. Do something with your future that is what you want to do," which actually blew my mind and actually caused an entire year of college not knowing what the hell I was supposed to do. But that simple questioning of what I should do, which is what led me to become a history major and then go into education and then get here today. I don't know what exactly my career path would have been otherwise. I could tell you it would probably have involved joining the service and doing other things because that's what I felt like I had to do at the time. So, yeah.
Sandy, you have your hand up.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I and Dave and Jim and Dave know about this, but I need to go and I'll be back at around 9:30 or a little after. So can I go next?
Yes, go ahead and check in and then you can go. Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay. Sandy Sorensen, High School, science teacher. I do have a time constraint. Obviously, I'm teaching camp invention this week that has now, just like the rest of us, switched to be online. And so it's kind of like reliving 2 months ago where they're just doing all this scrambling to get all of it online. I did it last year in person at Stargate. It was really fun. Really fun. And so just like Thursday, they told us, oh, by the way, you have to be online with the kids every day from 9 to 9:30, noon and 3. So I hope your schedules are wide open. And I went, okay, well, I guess I'll work that out. So today and tomorrow I'll have to do this. So I apologize for missing out, but it's for something really fun for kids, so I'm excited. So I'm doing good, feeling a little busy because I was working on that all weekend, trying to get the technology all worked out. I don't have any issues or elephants. Expectations, well, given this budget stuff, I don't really know what to expect. Just have good conversations about budget things. And an event that had a positive impact in my life, in the late 90s, I had been struggling through college for years and years and getting bad grades and not knowing what the heck to do with myself and not really understand how to study, and didn't have any money, so I was working too much. And so the university sent me a letter in Nebraska and said, sorry, we got to let you go because your grades aren't that great and you've been here a long time. So what was seemingly a kind of devastating experience is what brought me to Colorado to be a camp counselor, which then I was working for that camp for a while. And then 2000, I was on an outdoor education trip through camp with some people I met in California. And they said, we want you to come and lead trips with us through Arizona and Utah and California, which is how I saw the West. It was great. And then when we brought kids back to their school in Brentwood, California, it was a private school, the head of the school said, why don't you work for us? You're great. We heard great things. And I went, oh, okay. So I guess I got to go to college. That sounds like a great idea. So off I went and I finally finished college and here I am.
Darren, you also had a time constraint, I believe. Do you need to check in now so you can go, or are you good to go for a while?
No, sir. Mine's tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Marty.
Good morning. Marty McCarthy, principal of Thornton Middle School. Exciting to say that. And no issues or relevance. Expectations is to dig into the work and collaborate with some awesome people. I feel like everybody's telling their origin story, and I always wish mine involved like a radioactive spider, but my sort of education origin story starts with something that I don't think anybody considers a positive event, but it's substitute teaching story. I had just finished college and was applying to graduate programs in biology. My wife was really upset with me because she wanted me to have a real job. We'd just gotten married and wasn't looking forward to being poor. I mean, little did she know I was going to education. But so then I said, screw it, Ruth, I'm going to do it anyway, and started applying for programs and took a subbing job at Dakota Ridge High School. and worked there one day. And after that day, they said, hey, you know, this teacher just quit. Do you want to finish out the semester? I said, okay. And by the end of the semester, I knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So that was a chance encounter, and totally fell into it. But I think sometimes that's how the best things happen. So thanks.
Laura Mitchell.
Good morning. I don't know how to recognize Dorman in this new attire, but I like it. And congratulations, Marty, on your new position. Very excited for you to go over there and bring yourself into that role. So I'm Laura Mitchell. I'm serve on the Board of Ed, and I'm very good. We had a really nice weekend. Got through a really intense conversation with my sisters about my mom and dad's care. It's just really challenging. They both have dementia. My dad's in memory care, and they can't see each other. So we got through a lot. So it was a good weekend to get that out of the way. No issues or elephants, and my expectations are that we're just, you know, we're going to start on a new phase and get through this just like we did the other hard stuff, and try to come up with some good solutions and outcomes to find our way forward in such difficult times. The event that had a positive impact on me. I've been out of college about 5 years, and I'd grown up in the South, and in the South, you're probably a little bit older than most of you. You were raised to be a wife and a mom, and that's sort of what your expectations are. And you might have a job, but not really a career. But I'd started in this office, and I'd been in there about a year or so. And I just had these phenomenal bosses that saw something in me that I had never seen. And they encouraged me to apply for this executive leadership program. It's very, very competitive. And I was selected and spent a year in a government-wide program with all these other, just entry-level management kind of positions. And that year just helped me build my confidence, and with the mentorship of my bosses and their beliefs in me, just raised my expectations. And I began a career, and just changed my whole projection of my life and where I was going to go and what I was capable of. And so that was probably the biggest impact that just changed my outlook of myself, as well as the opportunities that I saw for myself, and being able to spend the rest of my career and what I was capable of doing.
Darren.
Hi, I'm Darren Oliver, principal at Silver Creek Elementary. I'm doing well. It's Monday, it's sun's out, it's gorgeous. No time constraints. I will be late tomorrow. Apologize to the group. No issues or elephants, expectations to continue our process, and as always, continue to learn from the process. Positive issue that happened in my life, I would say, when I was a 18-year-old young man leaving Northland, went to JUCO in Kansas. Like most 18-year-olds, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I was there to play baseball. I wasn't sure what my career would lead me to. And Dr. Muriel Jones saw my interest survey and pulled me aside and said she was going to make me a school teacher, because she saw that I had taken some early childhood classes at Northland. And she said, and not one of those damn PE teachers, she said, like most of the sport guys I was hanging out with. And within 2 weeks, she had me in a third grade classroom in Kansas. And that's all she wrote.
Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathy Plummer. I'm on the school board. I'm okay today. I spent a lot of the weekend doing a lot of hard reading, though. I would say the events with George Floyd have had a really tremendous impact on me, and I'm trying to educate myself and really figure out what to do. And, so a little more pensive maybe. My expectations is that I'm going to work with some amazing people to tackle some really hard issues. I'll tell you, I also have I think everybody's giving the board members, like in all these meetings, all the worst of the worst scenarios, because every meeting I go to, I'm just putting that out there. They're trying to prepare us for the worst. But I know we can get through anything. So that's my expectation. The event that had probably the most life-changing impact on me was the decision that I made to go study abroad my junior year. I got to spend the semester in Jerusalem and studied the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And it was absolutely life-changing. Travel tends to do that to me. Just makes me think. But that experience, I learned about the Islamic faith, the Jewish faith, politics, conflict, trust, history, and it really has shaped my life because it was so new and so foreign. And when you're 20 years old, and this is in the mid 80s, so again, showing my age, anyway, it was just everything, but it's really helped shape how I try and approach a lot of things, because you had to throw all your expectations out the window. We had classes, we had 3 Palestinian professors that came and gave their unfiltered viewpoint. We had 3 Israeli professors that gave their unfiltered viewpoint. And your job was to look at both and try and figure out, based on the truths that each were speaking for themselves, what was going on and what you thought. And so it was really incredible, and glad I had a chance to do it.
Matt.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Schmidt. I'm the principal at Pathways. I'm doing just fine this morning. Gorgeous day out there. No issues or elephants, no time constraints. I definitely, share the expectation of trying to put all the pieces to the puzzle together. I think it's always hard when it comes down to money and figuring things out, but I trust that as a group we'll get down that path, whatever that may be. As far as things that kind of impacted where I am at this point, something happened a long time ago that I would have never guessed would have influenced me the way it did. But I was a high schooler and getting my first job as a lifeguard in the city of Pueblo back in the day. Still, frankly, probably my favorite job. But I happened to randomly get assigned to the tough pool in town, we're in an area of low socioeconomic status folks, and there's definitely a lot of kids at that pool that struggled a ton in life and had rough families, and loved it. Ended up working there over 8 different summers through college and all that good stuff. Would have had no idea the impact it would have, except in the college world and trying to figure out what my life was going to be. I had left engineering school due to lack of interest. Just flat out was bored, and then I was wandering around, just going to school and living college and loving it, but had no idea what I wanted to do. And when it came down to it, I was like, God, I really enjoyed teaching kids how to swim. That was pretty fun. And I'm getting a science major right now, so what the heck? I should let's become a science teacher. So that's where that all ended up. But the bigger part of it was the type of pool that I had worked at, and that directly led to the type of school I've always worked at and chosen to work at. I love working with kids who struggle. It's weirdly enough my passion. It's completely opposite of the Beaver Cleaver background that I have myself. But working at Bessemer Pool back in the 90s was definitely kind of the weird turning point and exposing me to people that could use some help, and I loved it, and still love it today. So that's my story.
Mila.
Good morning. I'm Mila Shepard. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer. Doing well this morning. It's going to be a challenging few weeks. We're bringing our employees back to work on site at the ESC, and we're phasing that in. And look, Heather is there at the ESC. She's the vanguard. Nice. And dealing with people's fears and uncertainties, and dealing with a lot of just stress over that. You know, it was stressful to come home and work from home and get used to that. And now we've locked into a new habit. You know, it only takes 21 days to establish a new habit, they say. And so now we have a new habit, and breaking that is, or readjusting to that is difficult. And so having a lot of conversations with people who are afraid, who are struggling with a new habit of returning to on-site work, it's a challenging time. So anyway, I'm okay, but just breathing deeply and summoning the patience and the understanding and the empathy to help our people come back to work, and knowing that this is only just little waves in the pool. The tsunami of 4,000 employees returning to work in August to some form of on-site is coming. So anyway, that's just where I am this morning. I expect that we will lay some groundwork for some further conversation, and it won't be easy, but we're going to lay some good groundwork today and refresh ourselves on the issues we left on the table and the new issues that are in front of us in the area of budget related and compensation decisions. Yeah, I'm with Dave. I'm struggling to identify which positive event. There have been so many, but I'll stick with the origin story. And I was a baby teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I had a degree in math, and I couldn't find a job in the Denver area. There was a glut. That's how old I am, in the late 80s. And so I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico to just try something new and different, and got a job as a math teacher, and was just happily doing that and had no intention to do anything else but teach math. And it was only my third year of teaching. One of my colleagues, Kathy Lucas, came up to me and she said, "Have you ever thought about, being an administrator?" And I was like, "No." And she said, I really see something in you that I think you should pursue. And the University of New Mexico has this amazing internship program for educational administration. And you can get your master's in 18 months, and you can kill yourself by trying to teach at the same time as doing this master's on such an accelerated timeline. And she just, the mere suggestion of that, like so many of us, somebody sees something in you and suggests it, and it takes hold, and the seeds are planted. So I got my master's degree from UNM, and felt like, oh my gosh, nothing will ever be as hard as trying to teach full time and do your master's full time. And little did I know, that's exactly what the job is. So that was the best part of that internship. But no, that turned a corner for me, and I have loved being able to hopefully help people at a large scale, and have loved the work I've done as a principal and as a leader, and that was just a corner for me, and a positive support from somebody that saw something. Gosh only knows.
Linda.
Good morning. I apologize for my lateness in entering, and I exited a few minutes ago. We are having internet issues here for some reason, so I'm hot spotting and trying to get Lauren to get me moving. I'm Linda Walther, and I'm a retired counselor teacher in the district. I don't have my cheat sheet here, and all of a sudden I can't remember what I'm supposed to tell you. I have no issues or elephants. My expectations are that we'll work really hard and try and maintain the love for education that we have, and work with an amazing group. I have no time constraints. And like most of you, trying to pick one event is very difficult. So I'm going to go with being asked to join the negotiation teams in the late '80s by Rich Slicing, who was president then. After the first year, I went to Jay, who was the spokesperson, and said, I don't know that this is for me. I don't feel like I offered very much. I don't feel like I had much to contribute. And he said, well, just stay with it another year and we'll see how you go. So 40 years later, here I am, still trying to do the best work I can for teachers and students.
Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison Alter, a social studies teacher at Horizon High School. No issues or elephants, expectations. Just try to get through and do good work given our budgetary constraints. Events that had a positive impact on me, I guess, obviously there's been a lot, but I would have to go with, I had just finished my undergrad. I was working in a law firm because I was going to be a human rights lawyer, and I was studying for my LSATs, and I was totally miserable. And so I just remember sitting there at the kitchen table with my dad one day and like crying and not really knowing why. And he goes, "You're clearly unhappy. You should do something about it." And I was like, "But I've made this commitment and I have to do it." And he's like, "Why?" So I was basically putting this constraint on myself because I'd made this commitment. And he goes, "It's okay to change your mind. You're young. You'll figure it out." And that was a pivotal moment in my life. And not that it exactly set me directly on a path, but it gave me the mental freedom to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And it was a few years before I finally determined that I did want to be exactly what both my parents were, because they were both teachers. So I think maybe I was in an avoidance phase for a while, but it set me on the path of teaching, which put me at Thornton Middle School, which made me realize that I needed to do a lot of work to try to be equitable and incorporate cultural diversity into my classroom. So I started grad school. And while in grad school, I read this book called Waking Up White, which if you haven't read it and you're interested in understanding some of our racial past, it's phenomenal. It's by Debbie Irving. And I haven't stopped since. I now have like a pretty sizable stack of books that I've read on this subject. And obviously, in light of everything, now there's all these resources being shared. So I've just bought like 15 more books that I will work my way through. But I think in that one thing my dad said to me, it set me on the path of realizing that I am an advocate, and my biggest goal in life is empowering myself and others. And I've never been happier, even when things are really rough.
Teresa.
Good morning, everyone. Teresa Barajas, Assistant Principal at North Glen Middle School. I'm feeling really inspired by everybody's stories this morning. So thank you for that. I am struggling a little bit. I have my mom home with me right now. She had a heart attack last week, and so I'm taking care of her. She just was released from the hospital on Saturday. And so last year she also experienced an amputation. So we're struggling a bit, but we'll get through it. So as far as time constraints, I will probably be in and out because we're awaiting calls from doctors and scheduling appointments, and she has some needs. So I'll be in and out. And so I appreciate your support. Issues and elephants, no issues or elephants at this point. Expectations that we collaborate and that we do good work. A positive event. My grandma, she was my role model, and I looked up to her so much. But one event in my life that really stood out when I was 7 years old, my grandma was in her 70s. This is about 1982. There was a candidate for mayor, Federico Pena, and he was a voice for the Latinos in Denver. And so my grandma was so inspired that there was someone out there advocating for Latinos in Denver. And she had never voted before. My grandma basically grew up in a small farm town, and my family, she helped raise like all her grandkids. So she really just didn't get into that whole political piece. But when they moved to Denver, she got interested. And then when she seen Federico Pena, she decided, I'm going to register to vote. And she did for the first time at like 71 years old. She made the newspaper, and Federico Pena came to our house, and he, we have pictures, and I was only 7 standing there with my grandma, all proud. And my mom, I remember, made this cake because his signs were like blue. And my mom made this cake, and it was blue, and it said Pena. And so he didn't have time to eat the cake, but before he, we tried to encourage him to eat it, but thank goodness he didn't, because when he left, my cousin and I dug into that cake, and we had blue mouths, and it was funny. My mom's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad he didn't eat that cake. But it was a great memory. And my grandma, that moment and then moment forward, like she stood for like a great role model for me, but strength and leadership. And so that's always stood with me. And especially like thinking about what we're going through right now and just advocating for equality for everyone. So, yep, that's my story.
Jim.
I'm Jim. I'm one of your facilitators. It's great to be with you today on a day when we could be very dark and gloomy about so many things. It's great to hear that each of us seems to be blessed, that we have many positive things that happen in our life. I'd go back into the 90s for something that happened to me. I realized how powerful self-talk was for me, how much of a difference it could make for me. So I can tell you today that how am I? I'm doing better than I have any right to be. I can't believe it. It is just positive. It is good. I don't have any time constraints. My expectations would be that we'll continue to do good work, and it will be a tough sled, but I think we'll do positive work and do good work. Another positive difference for me was also in the 90s, when I finally figured out that unless I had a good reason, I was much better off to say yes than no right away.
Sounds good. And I'm Dave. I'm one of your facilitators. I'm very reflective today. I'll tell you about that when I get down to the last questions. No time constraints, no issues or elephants. My expectations are the same as Jim's. This is such a good group, and I know we've got some tough issues coming up, but you always handle them with dignity and grace, and it's incredible to work with you guys. I've got a couple things that I want to talk about. Today is the 1 year mark of my mom's passing away. And she was always a huge influence in my life. So miss her a great deal. But one of the coolest things that made a difference in my life was I'm old enough, I'm going to age myself. I'm old enough to remember being at my grandma's house when Glenn walked on the moon, when or Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And I remember just having, as a little kid, just goosebumps and thinking, man, that's the neatest thing in the world. I can't believe it. So when the astronauts took off, was it day before yesterday? Yeah, day before yesterday, we watched it. And I had that same feeling when they were taking off. And then we watched yesterday them docking with the space station and going into going from the capsule into the space station. And it has a lot of significance for me right now because my son, my youngest son, who is graduating this year, is looking into going into aeronautical engineering, and one of his dreams is to work for NASA. What an incredible thing to just watch that happen was unbelievable. So. All right, so we were supposed to take a break at 9:15. Do you want to take a quick break, Mila, before we get started and let people 10 minutes? Okay, so we are on a 10-minute break. When you come back, we'll talk about where we're going, all right? So Jim, how'd you finally get back in? Jim? Jim, how did you finally get back in? Jim, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Dave, but
Yeah, I was wondering if I couldn't be heard all of a sudden if my headset was doing something funky. Thanks, Mila.
Dave, you know, when you're married to a retired aerospace engineer, you watch all of the launch and docking procedures all weekend long.
Yeah, we did the same thing. I mean, Peyton was just mesmerized by it.
Yeah.
It was fun to watch him, and we have a young man that we took in, a kid that was living in his car, basically, that's been friends with Peyton for years and years. His name is AJ, and he was the same way. I mean, they couldn't take their eyes off the TV, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely is.
Jim, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I just got your text. That we can work that out. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
You bet. How did you end up getting back onto the Zoom, Jim?
I went back and found another link in my email.
Yeah.
I don't know why the calendar one usually works, but it did not want to work today.
Ah. So Milo, when everybody gets back, I'll let you talk about where you want to go here. I'll just turn it over to you, and you can chat about it and see what you want to start with and stuff. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, Dave and I are going to talk about the items that were left on the table. Yeah, and then we'll transition into committee reports.
Sounds good.
Mila, do you want me to run through remind people of the compensation MOA and then do my item first, and then you can do your item that we talked about?
Yeah, and Dave, the SEL TOSA, you may recall we have 12 out of the 48 positions that are currently placed at the more advantageous placement rules.
Yep.
I think you have that spreadsheet, but I just was carrying that number around.
Okay. Yeah, 12 is what I've got written down.
Yeah.
I couldn't find this morning the number of people who were placed on the teacher schedule, but might have been able to be accessed to the special placement rules if we change that ruling. Does that make sense? The question I asked, I couldn't find that number when I was looking for it. And I know we talked about it with Katrina and her team, or Katrina, but I don't think we ever received an actual number. At least I didn't receive an actual number.
I don't know if I did either, but I'll look at the spreadsheet and see if I can just figure it out.
Dave and Milo, for this next session, do you want anything entered on a Google document from us?
I think the idea today is no, because we're going to be doing hearing reports, and then tomorrow picking up items that can be worked on based on the recommendations from the committees.
Thank you.
Yeah, limber up your fingers. I think tomorrow's the big typing day. Roddy, do you want to go ahead and take us off of break?
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I think we're back from break, and thanks everyone for a good start to the morning. We'll turn to our agenda, and for those of you who like to have something visual in front of you, in our IBS shared team folder, you can find the subfolder called Agendas and Minutes. You'll find the agenda for today and tomorrow that was published in that folder. And we have a few topics today. We want to sort of review the whole scope of budget related items that we are seeing need to be addressed in our time together here in the month of June. And so we'll start with the compensation committee memo, and I'll turn it over to Dave to do that.
Awesome, thank you. So if you look on page 116 of your master agreement, that lays out the compensation study committee's guidance for this year and charge. And so today we're going to receive, we've already received one report, but we're going to receive the remaining reports on the from the compensation study committee and their recommendations. After we've heard all of these recommendations, then we will have the opportunity to, at the end of today and tomorrow, to start working on any items that we choose to take action on. And then in addition, writing the committee's charge for next year. So last, it may seem like an eternity ago, but pre-COVID, we did already receive a report from one of our subcommittees on teacher leadership. That committee, Marty did a great job of walking us through that recommendation on the main charge was to look at the 5C dollars that were designated for teacher leadership, talk a little bit about definitions and co-curriculars, and just to kind of big summarize that report. It's in your folder, but is the use of existing language to begin working in this next school year by learning services in developing a kind of streamlined system-wide department chair job description, and use that to
Dave, you froze up on us, bud.
For certified staff across the system. The next piece, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I was reading my notes. If you, yeah, go ahead.
Dave, you froze up on us on the last part of that, so you may need to repeat it.
My apologies. I'm not sure where you heard me last, but basically the recommendation was to develop the department chair, converting that into a teacher leadership job description, and then using funds to increase training and coaching and other opportunities in the system was kind of the general recommendation, which is sitting in the IBS folder for you guys to look at in more detail. And then the next item to report, which I'll be walking us through, is conducting a market study for the newly created social emotional learning teachers on special assignments position to determine an appropriate salary schedule for this leadership position. As you may or may not remember, I keep saying this time last year, but last spring, a year ago spring, it came to IBS's attention that we were, as we were hiring the SEL TOSAs and developing that position, a number of them, 12 of those teachers took on that assignment who had the benefit of placement on our salary schedule in an advantageous way. So maybe they were a school psychologist and starting in the MA20 column. Maybe they were a school, I'm sorry, a social worker starting in the MA20 column. Maybe they were a school psychologist who received, who was on the special service provider schedule. But in one fashion or another, 12 of them held special placement rules on the salary schedule. And we were tasked to figure out what to do about that. Last year, we agreed that they would be held harmless for this year. A report would be brought back to this committee to discuss what to do. So here is my really fancy report. There's nothing to really report. The SEL doses in other districts, although you can argue whether or not they're the same job or not, all of them were placed on a standard certified educator schedule. We are the only district that has such a varied number of special placement rules for our SSPs in the districts. So for example, if you were in Jeffco or whatever, social workers get placed on the standard schedule, psychologists get placed on the standard schedule. Nobody of our peers use special placement rules in the same fashion that we did. So all of the SEL TOSAs or similar like positions in the area, in the state, that we were able to identify treated them as standard certified educators. Now, some of them would do things like put them on extended year, maybe they had 10 extra days of the school year, something to that effect. But as far as their standard per diem base salary rate, it was the standard rate for all folks. So that was the market study analysis that we did that didn't have much to report. Moving forward, we looked at the job description for the SEL TOSAs, specifically what were the licenses that one could have and certifications to have the role, what were the job duties assigned to them, and so on. And when we looked at the job duties and job assignments, we have the required credentials could be anything from a standard teaching credential to one of our SSP credentials, really any credential, but just requiring specialized training. And when we look at the job duties generally fit into the area that do not require specialized training, with the exception of those SEL TOSAs that are qualified to conduct threat assessments, suicide threat assessments. They do perform in some schools that threat assessment as well. When we look at that particular job, part of the job duty, it's very similar to counselors in the system that also conduct threat assessments. Counselors are also placed on the salary schedule using the standard placement rules. Because of the market analysis and kind of the look at the job duty and requirements for the job, the comp committee is recommending that we place all SEL TOSAs on the standard placement schedule moving forward. So all new hires into that position would be placed on the standard teaching schedule, or in the manner for which you understand what I'm saying. I've kind of mixed up my words on that one. And that includes any existing employees that go into those positions after this school year that we just finished up, this hiring season. So for example, if I was a school psychologist and this time next year I applied for and got a SEL TOSA job, I would be replaced on the salary schedule using the standard placement rules for that are laid out in the contract. We are also recommending that we continue to grandfather those SEL TOSAs that were hired before this period of time we're talking about, so in this last school year or before, and let them maintain their special service provider placement rules in the and just continue to move along the salary schedule in a hold harmless situation. They took on a job that we didn't define. They took on a job without knowing that there was any risk to their pay status. And we believe that it is the fair way to approach their placement. There's 12 of them out of the larger whole. Questions?
There are 48 total, Dave. So
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
approximately a quarter of our current group.
Thank you. Yep. 12 out of 48. Milo, were you able to find the other number that I was asking for?
No, the information I have doesn't list the degree. Yeah.
The licensure. Okay. We were trying to figure out how many other of the newly hired SEL TOSAs could have been placed on the special service provider framework and weren't, but we don't have that available. We know there's a couple, but we don't have that available right now.
Questions for Dave or Mila around the SEL TOSAs? Any questions? Kathy.
So to implement the recommendations, does that require, is that one of the things that we're going to be talking about as like an issue, or is that something, I mean, it seems very reasonable to grandfather all the recommendations. What's the process to make that stick?
Yeah, so if the team is in agreement that we should do that, what we would do is task a language committee to write up what it would look like in language space. If the committee feels like we need to have story, interest, and options to discuss it in further detail, then we will. So it really just depends on the will of the body as far as next step. I'm prepared. I think Mila and I are prepared for whichever direction the body feels like we need to go.
Linda.
I just want to clarify down the road, if we have a psychologist that moves from that position into the CELTOSA position and they change the salary schedule that they're paid from, they would still get all the years of credit that they'd served in the district. It wouldn't be like a do-over, right?
Yeah, the only exception would be because the special service provider framework puts them a couple of steps up, they would retain their quote years of service, but potentially be replaced a step or two further down because of that. But that'd be part of the language that we would need to draft up if that's the will of the body. And then also reverse, if that SEL TOSA or psychologist SEL TOSA goes back to being a psychologist, then a replacement on the appropriate salary schedule placement rules.
Other questions for Dave or Mila? All right, I don't see any other questions. Anything else to add, Dave, or are you ready to move on?
I am ready to move on, except you know, I would like, because of just the timing and everything, if people were in a place where we should be writing language, then I would like the ability to start working on that this afternoon. If we're not and we need to go through story, interest, and options, absolutely take what, you know, we got to do what we got to do. But if we could, then I'd like to start that process with a temperature check with this group so that we can potentially bring stuff back to them tomorrow for discussion.
All right. So let's go ahead and do that. Take a temperature check. If you're, I think everybody's visible right now. So doing what Dave said about starting on it this afternoon, let me see your thumbs, folks. And Jim, I'll ask you to look them over too, so I don't miss anybody. I believe we have, yep, we have consensus, folks. So Dave, you have permission to move forward.
Right, so we'll start working on that and bring that back to you guys either tomorrow or at our next session afterwards. All right, Mila, your turn.
Okay. So the next item that we discussed that's lingering. Well, Dave, are you just marching down the bullets in the compensation study committee?
No, I just happened to be the next bullet on the
okay.
on the
All right.
item.
because I was going to talk briefly about the other lingering item and just give you some updated statistics on the cohort, the 2 years where we were hiring people at a reduced years of service. And we still have 135 people that were hired either in the 17-18 year or the 18-19 year. And 73 of them hired in 18-19, 62 of them from the 17-18 year. And these folks are anxiously awaiting word on whether we could or would consider restoring years of service to the surrounding years, instead of allowing 6 years of service credit, allowing up to 10. And we've run the numbers and been monitoring what those numbers are as we've seen attrition in that group. The cost to restore the years of service credit, and you may recall that during the school year, we in HR, we reached out to each of these people and said, now tell us exactly, send us your transcripts, let us figure out exactly what your years of service could have been if this rule were to change. And so the number is $830,000, $297.69. 830, 297 and 69 cents. So that's the cost. And I just want to like lodge that in there, updated numbers, 135 people in our system. And we will get around to talking about that in the entire package at some point. But I don't know if any of you have any questions about that. Dave, did you want to add anything?
No, not necessarily, but just that's the updated after those that have already either been non-renewed or leaving the system. Just so everybody knows, that's correct. That's the number of what we would be expecting to be out this coming school year. Correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And if you use Marty, I see your hand up, use the little chat button or the little participants button, but let me call on you to ask your question because I see your hand. I know Jim and Dave don't always see the hands.
I didn't see it that time. Sorry, Marty.
That's all right. Is that $800,000, that'll be a continual cost annually?
Yeah, that's ongoing, that's salary. So that's an immediate cost for, to implement it in the coming year and then ongoing. Any other questions on that little nugget of information?
I don't see any, Mila, so.
Okay.
And Mila, you're going to put in the for our discussion the like how many years that is for each group, right? Like X number of people have this many years and that many years, so that we can use that as part of story.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get that in granular level of detail.
All right.
Okay, so then the next couple of bullets in the Compensation Study Committee MOA, the third bullet has to do with researching and making a recommendation regarding the creation of an incentive for staff who serve at highly impacted schools. And so we had a subcommittee formed, and actually if you go to your IBS team drive and you look at the folder called Compensation Committee, you will see these subcommittee recommendations. And if you look at the middle one called incentives, you'll see it's a brief And I would encourage Dorman and Sandy served on this committee, as did Kim McLaughlin. And I know she was trying to call in earlier, Dave, and I don't know if you want to invite her at this point. Can you text her? Is she hanging out there?
I will text her and see if she's available still.
Okay.
But go ahead, guys.
Mila, can you repeat how to find that? Which one?
Yeah, it's in so it's in the IBS shared drive. It's there's a folder called Compensation Committee. Actually, I don't know how I put a star next to it, but I think there's a star next to it. And then inside of that, you'll find incentives. Did you find it? Great, thanks, Allison.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so so I don't know, you know, we didn't rehearse this at all, so I'm just gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Dorman or Sandy, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the tone of our conversations, the territory we covered? You can see the membership of the group listed there. We had Dorman, Jason Gooding, who's a former middle school assistant principal, now at an elementary as an assistant principal. We had Kim McLaughlin. We had Christy Patrick from Coronado Hills, a teacher. We had Terrell Price, an assistant principal from North Glen Middle. We had Ian Sablich, a teacher from North Glen Middle, Sandy, myself, and Heather Wimmer, a teacher at International School. And so it was a committee of folks who represent sort of a range of background and interests. And Dorman or Sandy, you want to share anything?
Well, we're still at the very beginning process of this committee. We're working to find out what retains a teacher in different types of situations, what makes the job positive, what makes you a go-getter, if you will. So we're looking for those types of items, thinking about groups and talking to different people and surveys and trying to figure out what we can do. Of course, there's always the monetary aspect, but we're also thinking there's a lot of things that aren't of a monetary basis. There are a lot of things that come up that perhaps aren't even going to be contractual. It's just different ways that we can operate as an organization. And that's kind of my understanding where we are at this point.
And Mila, so you know, I don't see Sandy on. I don't think she's back yet.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Dorman. Appreciate it. Sorry to put you on the spot there. And you're speaking probably without notes. Well done. For those of you who can see the file, you'll see that we had some recommendations to make, and I'll read them just for the record in case you can't see the sheet. We would request that the IBS team extend our charge to the 2021 school year. We want to, as a group, be looking at some of the frontline data. That's our applicant management system. And we want to look at more data in our applicant management system. We want to look at focus group data and exit survey data. And this is to the point Dorman was making about really trying to determine what makes people stay, what makes people come to our district, especially to schools that are perceived perhaps as harder to serve, and what makes people stick and stay once they get to a place like that. And we don't feel like we have a really good handle on the root causes of recruitment and retention. And we've identified a few places where we'd like to look. One of those is in this focus group construct. We have some questions that we'd like to ask people, and rather than another survey, we'd like to visit some specifically targeted sites where we looked at the data on turnover, and we looked at schools that are sort of beating the curve, you know, seem to be, in spite of all indicators that would indicate that they're perhaps difficult to serve, they have pretty high retention rates. And so we'd like to go and we'd like to visit and talk to staff members about their experience, and in an attempt to meld that then with the exit survey data that we are we're finally going to have a full year worth of exit survey data this year. HR has started doing an optional online survey when anybody submits a resignation form. And so we are gathering information and that should be helpful to us. And the frontline data has to do with recruitment. You know, how did you hear about us? Why are you here? So we think there's some good information there that we'd like time to dig into. We want to determine the root causes for retention and for turnover. And we've been using priority staffing as some terminology. We've really been struggling with like this concept, the name hard to fill. We agreed we don't want any sort of negative terminology or value-laden terminology that says anything about a school being hard or difficult or anything negative. And so we've been struggling to find, like, what do we call these schools where you know, these factors are in place that make it challenging. And so we've just been calling them priority staffing for now, but we don't love that name. It's a little dry. And so one of our charges to ourselves is to figure out how to refer to these sites and locations. We, in our early research, determined that the location is not always the difficulty. Subject area really matters, as well as time of year. If you're trying to fill a hard to fill subject area in late July or August, good luck to you. You're not going to have much of a candidate pool. And that seems to be a really huge factor that we learned in our research during the spring. So the positions, the subject areas matter, no matter what school you're at, whether it's one of these sort of priority staffing schools or whether it's a different type of school. Subject area does come into play. And then we want to determine, once we understand the root cause, that you can't really fix a problem when you don't know what's causing the problem. And so if we don't understand what makes people come and what makes people stay, it's going to be hard for us to identify effective incentives. And so once we have some of those root causes perhaps better identified, we would like to then work, as Dorman said, on incentives so that many of them are not necessarily contractual language or compensation related. They may have more to do with time or with teaming and support structures. And so we would like time to explore that whole gamut of interest and factors that we see at play in some of our schools. So let me pause and see if there are questions. Or Dorman, if you have anything you want to add.
I don't see any, Mila.
Okay. So I think that the question is similar to the one Dave asked. Oh, here's Sandy back. Let's just see if she has anything she wants to add. Hey, Sandy, are you back with us? Here she comes. Hey, Sandy, your timing is exquisite. I just got finished talking about the work we did on the incentives subcommittee, and we reviewed this sheet that I have uploaded. And I'm not sure if she's, yeah.
Yeah, she reacted to you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Sorry.
Yeah. No,
I'm just recovering from the children. Okay. Yeah.
So Dorman shared a little bit. I shared the recommendations that we made that are on this worksheet that's in our shared folder. And realizing that you haven't heard what we talked about, it's hard for you to make any comments, but if you have anything you want to share about the work we did on the incentive subcommittee, please do.
I was actually looking for the document earlier this morning on that.
It's in there. It's in the shared folder. It's under the compensation committee folder, and then it's in that.
While you're looking, Sandy, Dorman has his hand up. Dorman.
I think that's left over from another time, and I can't figure out how to I can't put my hand down. I can raise it again.
It's off. Okay, and now it's on. So, we'll get it yet, Norman.
Technical difficulty. I guess while Sandy takes a look at that and just make sure that, much like in the last question, this SEL TOSA, if the group, I would ask Dave to take a temperature check, and if the group wanted us to work on drafting a little bit of language to extend the charge to this group to continue to work as a compensation committee subcommittee in the manner that I've outlined, I'm curious to know if there's a charge from this group or a warmness to that concept that we go ahead and draft some language for you to look at our next meeting.
Okay, let's see your thumbs on what Mila just said, and help me out, Jim, if you would, please. I believe, hang on just a second. You have consensus, Dave. Yours is sideways. Did you want to talk about that, or?
I mean, here's my, and I expressed this when we first put on this last year. We have been toying with this on and off again for about 7 years now, and have not found any work on it. More than glad to use the data from Mila's research to see if there's something new in the environment, new data that we can use to figure something out. I just have reservations about this becoming a perpetual, like, every year we look at retention, bonuses, hard to fill, whatever the category is, when the research is dubious about whether or not any of that is effective. Would love to see the research and focus group stuff, and so that's why I'm thumb sideways instead of thumbs down, because we have an avenue for some, like, in Adams 12 data that might be helpful. But I'm not in favor of this becoming something we look at every single year.
All right, you do have consensus to move forward, Mila, and Dave stated his concerns, so you can move forward with it.
Great. Thank you. I would agree. I'm not eager for perpetual committees either, but yeah. Okay. The fourth bullet in the master agreement MOA talks about researching and making a recommendation regarding removing the master's degree requirement on the certified salary schedule in recognition of alternative educational equivalents such as district professional development or CTE accreditation. And I do have a committee that a large committee that is eager to come and meet with you all this morning and present their work. We scheduled them for 11 o'clock, thinking that we were really going to, just be pushing up to that time, and that we would stop whatever we were doing at 11 to hear from them. So I don't know if I can get some of them to log on a little bit earlier, or Dave, do you feel like there's something else that we can meaningfully do with our time until 11, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, if people give me a few minutes, I had previously drafted up some language to noodle through for the special service or the SEL TOSA piece. So if we give like a 10-minute break, then I might be able to share that with folks, and then we can just have people react to, I'm going to warn everybody that because no one else has looked at it, it's Dave's like really bad dyslexic social studies teacher writing, not like perfect writing, but we could at least see if the direction is the right direction to go in, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you.
Sorry, Jim?
So you have 2 writing groups. Maybe there'll be just a little bit of writing for both. I wonder if you'd like to go into 2 different breakout rooms and do some writing and look at it now and then bring it back in a period of time.
I mean, that works for me. If like I said, if someone else wants to look at my crazy chicken scratchy typing before showing it to the whole world, I'd probably appreciate that just a tad bit. But we could go break up, at least have a couple of people look at it with me, give everyone a 10-15 minute pause, and then come back while Mila tries to get the rest of the group up. I think that's probably would be an effective amount of time. I know that Rod is the host, and so he would have to create any groups that we
Right.
would want to work with me on that effort.
So Dave, are you saying you just would like a group of folks with you to look over what you're doing and not put the other group in a writing group?
Yes, because
Okay.
I really believe that we just have to carry forward the bullets on the master agreement, the certified for the compensation study committee for the research piece. I think we just really need just to carry that if we're in agreement of just carrying that bullet forward. We don't have to write new language to do the work that says do more work on something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So how many folks would you like to help you out, Dave?
If you could give me, 3-4 people, that would be great.
Okay. Can we get 3 volunteers to go see to work with Dave, 3 or 4? I've got Allison, Laura Leppi.
You get 2 administrators, Dave?
Yeah, a couple administrators.
I'll come along.
Okay, Mila and Matt.
Matt.
Yep. So there's your group.
Okay.
Roddy,
So Roddy and Chad, if you didn't capture those names, we could name them again. Can you form a little subgroup for us, and we can go offline privately away from the public feed?
So here they are, Roddy. It's Allison, Laura Leppi, Mila, and Matt and Dave. And then what did you say, 15 minutes, Dave?
Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of the folks can take a 15-minute break. So again, Allison, oh, there he goes. Boy, he's quick.
And then how much time do we want to give them?
15 minutes, Roddy.
15 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Not a problem.
There you go. Okay, the rest of you, oh, and Dave. We need Dave in there too. Yep.
I'm still in the regular room.
And Allison, yep.
Me too.
Oh.
Oh, wait, I wasn't on the committee, sorry. Never mind.
I still see.
Should we message? Yeah, let me pull up the chatty chat.
Okay, everybody else has 15 minutes, so
Okay, Roddy, I think we're ready to come back and come off of the break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Looks like we're all mostly working our way back in. I'll give everyone another second to turn on their cameras. While we're doing that, a new document has been placed in the compensation folder on the team drive titled SEL TOSA. That's where we've captured the draft writing here. I'll wait to explain more once we have everybody back with us.
And I'm admitting some guests for our next portion. And thanks for joining early, guys. And we'll transition in a minute to that committee report when we're done with this one.
Great, thanks for doing that.
I think, although my screen's having, adjusting all the time with our new guests. So I think I've got everybody that needs to be on. Where we have made this suggestion to be inserted, if you have your master agreement out, this would go in Appendix A, Section 10, and we would create a letter G. Or if you have the physical document, it's on page 87, about midway through the page is where this language would be inserted. So I'll give people a second to pull up the references, the documents in the drive, and then if you're looking at your master agreement. So what we've tried to capture here is the idea that we, for the first time, have people who have special service or special placement rules that might serve in a different capacity. In our research, I forgot to mention this in the story, that had never really happened until we invented this SEL TOSA position. So you're hired under one set of placement rules, but serve potentially in another. And so what we've tried to do is capture this idea by using language like we have previously with year-specific language, saying anyone who was hired before the, in the 18-19 school year or before, they're not getting replaced. They're just continuing to move through the salary schedule as they said. If they were hired or in that position before that, we're holding all those people harmless. And then anyone who's moving forward, if you are hired, you're going to be in that position. You have special placement rules. You're going to be in that position. You're on those special placement rules. If you move out, you'll be replaced on the certified salary schedule according to the placement rule for that position. So to make it clear, before now, we're holding it harmless, and then moving forward this school year and forward, you'll be replaced on the salary schedule for which it is appropriate for the position that you serve in. I explained to the team, we chose not to call out one particular group because this really isn't about, it came to light because of the SEL TOSAs, but it's not just about that position. It's really theoretically any position that has special placement rules. We want to kind of encapsulate an oversight at the time when we created those schedules and rules to begin with. So what people look at those things, you can hear the trash truck has decided to join our conversation. And then ask questions or make editorial comments from there.
So you want to give a little time for him to read it over, Dave, and then ask questions, right?
Yeah, it's relatively short, but yeah, just give him a moment, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, any questions for Dave on the document? Raise your hand in the chat if you will, or in the, not the chat, the participants, please. Any questions? Dave, I don't see any.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is put a pin in this, let everyone absorb it over the night, and then we can bring this back up first thing tomorrow for a vote if people are still okay with it or may have no other suggestions or comments. I just don't want to rush through and have somebody 5 minutes after we get off the call say, oh my gosh, we messed up this part. Let's give it a moment to, or give it the night to sit in the brain and then come back first thing tomorrow and take care of it.
Okay. Mila, is your entire group on board with us now?
Yeah, I think Dorman has a question before, or is your hand just up, Dorman, in the window? Dorman? Okay, I think, oh, okay. No hands are up. Yeah, so let's then turn to the other compensation study committee subcommittee that did work during the year. And this was a group that had some membership. Let me direct you back to the IBS team drive, to the compensation committee folder, and to the document titled Recommendations MA Alt Credit Subcommittee. And so if you'll go there, you'll see the full list of members. And we have some of them online with us this morning. And so I really appreciate the folks who have joined us. Aaron Cooper, give a wave, Aaron, if you would. Adria Merson, Adria, if you'd give a wave. We've got Tessa Gargano, give a wave, Tessa. And
hi, everyone. Real quick, Marv's Zoom crashed, so I have Marv on speakerphone. So he is here, but in a different capacity.
Excellent. I was just going to say, and I'm pretty sure Marv's going to join us, but we've all been having technical difficulties. So hi, Marv, welcome. We had some other members on the committee as well who are listed there. Paula Dickerson, Marty Gutierrez, I think will join us. When scooting up the time, I didn't hear from him. So, you know, he may get on at 11 and we'll be done. But anyway, Marty served on the committee as well, and hopefully he'll be popping in. Christy Weaver, who's our director of CTE and post-secondary readiness. Kathlina Blackman, I think is not available right now, but she's a CTE teacher who joined us. Oh, here's Marty waiting to be admitted. Here we go. Marv was on the committee, as was Janet Rendon, the principal at Bowman Tech. So, so a good group. And Marty, are you with us now? I'm just looking for you, sir. We've gone to 2 screens with our expanded groups. So great. Anyway, let me try it again. Just looking for Marty. Okay. Anyway, we'll keep working on getting him on board with us. Thanks for your patience all. And so this group did some work all year long, or during a good portion of the year, and has this report for you that's in your folder. And various members of the team are going to speak to parts of it just to walk you through it. And in case you don't have access to be reading it, we'll walk you through the contents of it and sort of what our work was and what our recommendation is. And so I think as we describe this, Tessa, you were going to talk a little bit about the the background information that's at the top of the report. I'll throw it to you.
Great. So yes, we just wanted to start by giving you all just a little bit of background information about our CTE programmings. First of all, currently there are 7 non-degreed teachers and 25 teaching positions in our CTE programs. We're expanding our CTE programming with the new Washington Square building, as well as CTE programming in our comprehensive high school. So it is a growing program. These positions are extremely difficult to recruit for because oftentimes we are paying much less than industry counterparts. We have some fantastic CTE instructors. So retention of our staff is very important and very desired. We're just looking for equitable treatment for all of the certified educators with regard to salary advancement. And then also in industry specific training, courses are often offered in less than 5-hour blocks of time, which is different than traditional professional development courses that we see. That's just a little bit of the background information before we dive into some of the other things that we discussed.
Thanks, Tessa. And then Erin, I believe, is going to speak a little bit to some of the recommendations our committee wants to make to this group.
Good morning. Thank you. Hopefully everybody could hear me okay. First recommendation that we wanted to make is to allow courses that are 5 hours or less, which is a full day conference, to group other courses together towards salary advancement. Second one would be allow currently employed CTE teachers to submit documentation of courses taken previously during their employment with the district for salary advancement. And then credit for repeated recertification will be given if this repeated recertification is required by the school principal. And we also put in that there should be a form for that approval. Number 3, develop form a CTE review panel to monitor certifications and provide providers that offer value to the CTE program as it is. Courses on this list are considered transcripted IHB credit and do not require approval through the IHB process. Review panel members are recommended to include director of CTE, the principal or designee from Bowman, and then principal for Washington Square, principal for Comprehensive High School, CTE teachers, CTE teacher from Bowman and Washington Square, human resources representative, and then a DTEA representative. Review panel will create criteria for determination of course validity, consideration of the degree to which the course is required for the CTE credential, consideration of the degree to which the course is requested, consideration of the degree to which the course will provide industry certification for the school or students in the program, consideration of the degree to which the course is required by the industry advisory committee as part of the program's 5-year plan, consideration of the degree to which the course will add value and guaranteed and viable curriculum and instruction of the students of the program, and then consideration of the state, regional, or national accreditation of the provider.
Thanks, Erin. And I think Adria was prepared to speak about some of those issues as well. Adria, the next section was going to be taken by Kathlena, but maybe you could just share a little bit about from item 4.
Yeah, sure. So item 4 is really around that part that Tessa talked about where teachers don't have a traditional degree, right? Because if you're going to be, a master electrician or a master welder or whatever, you don't necessarily have that undergraduate degree, nor do you necessarily have a master's degree. And so as we think about teachers moving along the salary scale, they really get stuck, okay? Because since they don't have an undergraduate degree, they can't get a master's degree, and they can never get to that MA plus 80. And so what this would do is it would allow non-bachelor's degree CTE teachers to move across the salary scale all the way to MA plus 80. We do have a couple of stipulations listed there. The first one is that for each lane advanced after the BA plus 80, at least 10 quarter hours would be accredited university or district related PD on pedagogical practices. So the idea being that we want to make sure that not only are they honing their craft in that space of, let's say, actual electrical work, they also are honing their craft in that idea of pedagogical practices. And the second stipulation being that all movement beyond that BA plus 80 would require coursework be directly related to the current area of teaching. So all the courses are related to that current area of teaching, and like that first stipulation, at least 10 of the quarter hours would be accredited university or district related PD that has to do with pedagogical.
And Marty, I think you finally got in after many tries. Good job.
I did. So I am in, and I think the biggest thing in part 5 of the document, or this number 5, is that we also want, these folks are going to have to follow the existing rules that are related toward earning recertification credit versus salary advancement credits. So all the stipulations that are there, we would also expect folks to follow those. And then we also, part of our task was to look about degreed teachers who have not earned masters. I'm one of those old guys that's been here teaching for a long time, and I've been at a BA plus 80, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of financial sense for me to finish my master's. So we looked at those kinds of folks, or we wanted to look at those kinds of situations too, where we're allowing some people to move. Would we also allow degreed teachers that have not earned their master's to move up the salary schedule? So that's a future question and consideration we're looking at.
And then if you look at the rest of this document, you see a table and you see transcripted IHB credit. And what we attempted to do is mimic what happens currently for degreed teachers. And it's really very straightforward. You say, is it an accredited university? You know, do you have a transcript from that university? And those courses are what move people across the salary schedule. But when you enter the CTE world, you have lots of organizations that present value add, valid development that results in better subject area experts. And they're just not tracked, in the same way that accredited universities are. And so we began a process of researching, first of all, like what does CDE accept and put forward as endorsement, acceptable endorsement sources. And then our own experiences and knowledge of the fields. And so you see the endorsement areas on this table, and you see just acronym soup. All of these are understood to be national industry organizations, and they're either licenses or certifications that these are the providers of those. These are the certifications, and then in the third column are the providers of those certifications. And so it's just acronym soup, and thank goodness for Aaron and for Tessa and for Marv and Janet and Kathlina and the CTE folks on this committee who gave us just a 101 on the world of CTE and these different endorsement areas and what it's like to come out of perhaps a non-educational profession and into the educational side. And so we learned a lot about that journey. And we would recommend, this is the part of the recommendation, that this table, that this list of providers and certifications be established and then maintained by that group whose composition we described in number 3, CTE review panel, that there be this multidisciplinary review panel that looks at who are the providers of value-added development or certifications, and then adds or subtracts from this table of endorsements and certifications and their providers. So that table is part of that recommendation, and that is the list that we propose to create and maintain. So let me ask the committee if there's anything else that you want to share, any examples, any other information that you feel like, oh yeah, we forgot to mention.
And of course I came on late, but I would just like to thank the committee because a lot of members that came on board that work in CTE, was very informative. I mean, we didn't know some of the situations that folks that teach in this area get stuck in. And we really wanted to make it worthwhile for some of these folks to come into education.
And I would just say, I would add to that, I would just say as we add to CTE, I think it's very important as we grow and add different programs that teachers are able to move across the scale. So.
Thanks, Marv. Glad you were able to join us instead of just on Tessa's speakerphone.
Yeah, I finally got on, so thanks.
Thanks for persisting.
So Mila, did you want to take questions around this? Is that the next thing? So questions for the team, the committee? And again, please use your hand in your participants box. So I've got Dorman and then Colleen.
I would just like to say thanks to the committee for this hard work. CTE is going to be very, very important for our district. It always has been and is going to be expanding in the future, and it really meets the needs of many of our students. So we really want to honor the work those teachers do. My specific question is, in that master's area where 10 credits will be on pedagogical, and then the other 10 would be specific to the teaching subject. Why was the 10 credits for pedagogical put in there? What was the discussion around that?
Part of the reason for that, and I invite anybody else to jump in too, is that mirrors a little bit of the current construct in the IHB process. Once you get up to the, Dave, help me here. You do IHB a whole lot more than I do, but is that not?
So when we talk, so I can jump in. So when you're getting into the 80s, right, like the BA 80 versus MA and MA 80, you have to have college or district transcripted salary advancement credit that is in your content area, and it has to be approved. And so what that is, my understanding from our previous conversation, because I think I was there the day you guys had this part of the conversation, was that by allowing people to access the beyond the 80s, basically what it's doing is maintaining the same set of kind of rules, but allowing them to use industry certification up to half of the lane past the BA 80 section, I believe is the rationale. So maintaining kind of that similar standard to move across the rest of the way the salary schedule.
But we also split it, as Adria mentioned, into pedagogy. You know, these are focused content specialization areas, not necessarily having to do with the art or craft of teaching your content. And so we felt like at a certain point, the work that you do in our own district on delivering, you know, various elements of your specialty curriculum are just as value add to your classroom. And so the split of 10 pedagogical and 10 subject area was a desire to try and bolster both parts of a teacher's work, the craft of teaching, as well as the content knowledge.
Colleen.
I don't know if Dave answered this or not, but I was wondering if there's anything in here that holds them to a higher standard than regular certified teachers, because we want them to be equitable. I want to know that this doesn't impose an extra burden on them that regular teachers don't have, because I want the two groups to be equitable, I guess.
I don't believe, you know, our intention was equity in treatment of all of our certified employees. And so I don't think we intentionally put anything in there that's more onerous or not equitable in terms of advancement. Anybody on the committee recall any conversation where you feel like there might be a difference, or you're aware of something that's a little different? Or Dave?
I'd love to hear from Aaron as our resident CTE teacher, you know, as someone who'd have to live it, whether he felt like it was equitable or overburdensome.
And thank you for the question, Colleen. That's actually something that we did discuss. Moving past that BA 80, we figured we came to the consideration that it's very equitable when you're moving through that master's side to do that 10 and 10. So as a committee, we did agree upon that they could use industry standards as part of their advancement. But then when we get into the mastery fact of the teaching involvement along with the actual career tech ed, that it was very equitable to do the 10 and 10, and then they can use industry as long as it was approved to go through BA 80. But thank you for the consideration.
Other questions, folks? Colleen, your hand's still up, so. Other questions?
And like you heard at the beginning, this is 7, maybe 8 teachers. I think Marv just hired one more non-degreed person than at the time we finished our work in early March or late February. So there might be 8 total right now. Many folks come out of industry without a need for a degree, and but we wanted to give you a sense of the scope of that. Currently it's 7 and now maybe up to 8 people in the district. So we're not talking about a change in rules for dozens. It is some.
Allison.
So would this not apply to CTE teachers who do have an undergrad degree?
Correct. You see the use of the word non-degreed teachers and non-degreed certified or non-degreed CTE. So if you have a bachelor's degree, like Tessa, for example, who is a CTE teacher in a comprehensive high school, she has a degree, she has to have a degree. Many of our CTE subjects do require that. And so those folks are just on the normal treatment, the IHB process. There's already a process defined for them. We just had this little group of people that were in this no man's land of they don't have a degree, so, you know, they can't advance across the schedule.
I guess my question then is that creating a different kind of equity issue where we're going to allow CTE teachers who don't have a degree to move to MA 80 without a master's, but some CTE teachers who do have a degree will not be able to move beyond that?
Well, and I think that really surfaces the question that we labeled as future question, because this committee was originally commissioned as a compensation study committee. If you look at our charge, we were to explore alternative credit, and we were to explore that whole construct of master's degree. We as a committee, and I should have said this at the beginning, really we chose to focus on CTE in light of the fact that we were opening a new CTE program. We knew we would be expanding this number of people in our system. That charge was really broad. And so as a committee, we narrowed it to the CTE element, but we see as outstanding the recommendation that's still in the master agreement that says, make a recommendation regarding removing the master's degree requirement on the certified salary schedule in recognition of alternative educational equivalents, such as professional development. So we feel like with this work, we've addressed the CTE portion, but we feel like there's work to be done, and exactly to the point you make, Allison. And Dave, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Dave and then Aaron.
I think the biggest question, you know, that makes this work about the equity is about access versus like ease, right? So I maybe this is what Aaron was going to talk about. I'm not sure, but you know, I've spent a lot of time talking to some of the folks, and with one program available for like a bachelor's in auto mechanics, how could, you know, what's the reality of our teachers going and getting that bachelor's and then getting to the master's program? Even if they had access to it, we'd be asking them to put in $50, $60 to $100,000 just to have access to the other half of the master's degree schedule, which, you know, that access level, just from a dollars and cents standpoint, is just, that's where, to me, a huge part of the inequity is that it's much easier to just get random credits if you're on one side of the degree, or to add the master's degree in teaching or something like that when you already have that initial investment, after we've asked many of these teachers to invest thousands of dollars just to get to the place of being a master electrician or a master mechanic, or I apologize, I'm not a CT because I don't know all the right phraseologies, but they've already invested that money to be a great and qualified teacher for this space. Aaron, I don't know if you want to add more to what I was saying, or add something else in general.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you, Dave. And yeah, master in front of electrician, any of that in the CTE world means that you're a master in your craft. When we started this committee, we also spoke of what you guys discussed earlier with recruitment, retainment of teachers and educators in our district, and keeping it very competitive to the actual trade itself as well. So I don't think that there was a separation or a segregation between regular teachers and CTE. It just gave getting a master electrician or a master mechanic in a very qualified, highly qualified educator. It gives the students the opportunity to learn from a qualified individual. And I think that brings, that the validity of that class up a lot.
I wonder if one of you, Aaron, or maybe Marv, or Christy, welcome. I see you just joined us. We started a little early, so sorry, Christy, but I wonder if one of you could speak to, I think I found it to be, I knew this, but I think members of our committee really were quite interested to understand what goes into getting a master electrician license or a master mechanics certification. Could you just describe for the group the number of hours, the cost, the process to getting one of those industry certifications that even allows you to step in our front door for your first year on the job?
So I can speak to that, and I can speak to the ASE certification in the automotive field, because obviously that's a big program we have at Bowman, and that's a series of 13 intricate exams that assess a lot of your knowledge in everything on a car, from electrical systems to engines to steering and suspension. So, but it's 13 exams. They cost about $200 per exam. A lot of work goes in. They're very hard to pass. So no one can just walk in and pass those exams. You have to have a lot of background knowledge. You have to have a lot of, you got to work a lot to understand what happens there. So to be a master ASE tech, you've got to not only take those 13 exams and pass those, then you have continuing education, or you lose those. And I think it's a 2-year period or 3-year period that you've got to go back and basically prove that you've done some continuing. As we all know, in the automotive field is a good example that how that field continuously changes. So you've got to not only be a master ASE and pass those, but you have to go back and do some continuing ed to make sure that those certifications are kept up to date. So it's a pretty extensive process. And I would say the same thing falls with electricians as a master electrician, master plumber, diesel, all those things that we have those programs on. I think they're very similar to that all the way across the board.
Tessa, I think you had your hand up, right?
I did. I was going to speak to similarly what Marv spoke on. A lot of these teachers are having to, go through these certification programs far beyond what they're required to do just to obtain a license through CTE, just to be relevant to our students and provide the best CTE education we can. So that's really where it's coming from, is that we just need to be equitable in the professional development that they're doing for their trade to be able to recognize that on the salary schedule.
All right, anything else on this, Mila?
Don't know if there are any questions about the particular language in the proposal. If you're less than clear about anything that we recommended?
I have a question. The list that you guys had on there, were you recommending that from CDE and then expanding, recommending that go into the master agreement or be part of the documentation for salary advancement that is part of the traditional IHB process, or in that gigantic form of like 27 different ways of getting credit across the different ways?
Yeah, the table, Dave, you're referring to that table at the bottom. Yeah, I am not recommending including that in the master agreement. We don't want to have to renegotiate that, but we do want a panel, kind of a standing, we have an IHB subcommittee, and our thought as a group, and jump in team if I am missing any part of this, but our thought was perhaps a quarterly or maybe semester, a periodic group meeting, this review panel, where we look at, oh, hey, here's a provider in the field that we've never heard of, and this teacher is suggesting that credits from them, really should be considered as pre-approved credit, and so this group of administrators from comprehensive as well as CTE programs, HR, and DTEA would consider, what's the source of this, coursework? What is the certification? Is this something that we believe to be a value add? So it's not up to a supervisor or a single person sitting in HR to decide, but there's a regular monitoring and maintenance of that list. And that really just the formation of that review panel and the maintenance of that list is something that lives as part of the IHP process. I don't think any more than the formation of the panel needs to live in the master agreement.
All right, any other questions, comments from the committee? Want to leave anybody out?
Yeah, I really want to thank this committee. They met quite a few times over the winter, and we learned a lot from each other, as you've heard them say. We learned a lot about CTE, and I think this work goes a long way toward valuing a portion of our certified educators that have felt a little bit perhaps unrecognized.
So Mila, procedural question for you. Do you want the blessing of this group? How do you want to proceed forward with this?
So I think, the intention of having the committee here is to ask and answer questions. I think I'd like, as we do with most things, to let this language and recommendation just sit with the IBS team. And then we'd come back tomorrow and discuss whether, what we might want to incorporate. I could perhaps bring a draft of some language that would go into the master agreement for consideration. So much like we've done with some of the other topics today.
Thanks. That's what I needed to know. Thank you, Mila. Yeah. All right. Any other questions for the committee, or any comments from the committee before we dismiss them? That's not a good word. I'm sorry.
I think if you're looking at the chat, you see the appreciation of Kathy Palmer, echoed by Chris and Shelley. From the whole IBS team, I do just want to extend our thanks and give you guys some applause. Yeah. All right. So if you are, thank you, committee members, and we'll let you guys disconnect at this point, and we'll keep on going.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
This is a very advanced group today. You're super speedy.
Yeah. All right. So Mila, Dave, where do you want to proceed from here? You have roughly 40 minutes-ish.
I think we could, if we wanted to start some of the discussion around the CTE space, because I don't want to, I want people to still be able to germinate on some of it anyway. So, we won't be able to wrap up but we probably should get to a place of figuring out if there's a direction we want Mila or a writing team to put some stuff together for us to look at tomorrow to react to, but we need to make sure that that's the will of the body, and any direction or issues or guidance they would give to that committee based on the recommendation.
Okay.
So don't everyone jump up at once.
I was just gonna say.
Are there any concerns? Are there any other questions? We gave you a chance to ask, to the committee, but do you just have some things you want to talk on the team about?
Kathy, you've got your hand up.
So, I mean, to me, everything makes sense. I mean, I really do want to value everybody's contribution, and it feels like for different situations, you've got to have more flexibility. I just didn't know, is there any downside to making any of these changes? I mean, I don't know what the, are people worried about cost, or were more people worried about, the equity piece and how that would be viewed? I'm just trying to figure out where any difficulties could arise from implementing the recommendations.
Colleen.
I don't know if this would address you, Kathy, but these people put out high school kids who can go into the field and earn a living, and college isn't for everyone. And my son was a welder for a while. It's very difficult work. It's grueling. Every job he ever had, he had to go in and do a test. And if he didn't pass the test, he wouldn't get the job. So these people who are teaching our high school kids how to earn a top dollar without having to go to four-year college is super important to me and my heart, because a lot of my family members are mechanics, welders, that kind of thing, and they do good work, and they had to put in a lot of time and prove themselves to get where they are. So,
Dave.
I think there's of course a cost. We're not talking about a large number of people, nor is anyone going to shift all the way over across the salary schedule in their first year. So it's not, a major cost component. I think the biggest, I'm gonna say downside, I'm gonna say issue that needs to be worked through is just the kind of institutional shift change about granting people access to the master's degree section without having that master's degree. Whether I think we all agree about the CTE and the equity issues and that kind of stuff, but there will be constituents among all of our groups here that say, why are we paying and valuing some of this work as master's graduate level work? I think I have strong arguments. I think Colleen has strong arguments, and many of us do. I think that's the biggest hurdle that's not unsurmountable or not something that we should tackle, right? Like there are hurdles that you should tackle because it's the right hurdle to jump over, but it is going to be a institutional hurdle and adjustment that we just need to be aware of and handle appropriately when we communicate out whatever decisions we do or do not make with our different constituent groups.
Kathy, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I was just like, hey, this seems good. Let's let's do it. So just trying to understand, what might be out there. So that was very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
And the other piece, just because this is the first time we're doing any of this work, if we decide to do anything else in the master's degree, like allowing people to access without a master's degree, removing the barrier, we are kind of setting the pattern, right? So, obviously it will look different if we're talking about non-CTE teachers. It'll obviously look different, but we're kind of setting the mold of what it might look like moving forward. So that's another area of just consideration of, especially that, I think Adria talked about it best in the committee report, but that combination of asking people to do more graduate versus using the 80s rule, I called it, all the way across. If it, is that the right mix? Is 10 and 10 the right mix, or should it be higher? Should it be lower? So I think there are still things for us to really noodle through and be able to be careful about, because we are setting the pattern for what this could look like in the future.
Yeah, and I think that future question around, is the master's degree an impermeable barrier? If you're a degreed teacher, which most of the vast majority of our certified people are, you have to earn, right now you have to earn a master's to get into that second part of the salary schedule. And so the compensation committee, and Bo, I think I would look to you. You were perhaps on the compensation committee, really was having some conversations a year or so ago saying, is a master's degree the secret sauce? I think we're pretty proud of the professional development that we do for our teachers and find it to be absolutely targeted to our kids' needs in ways that master's degree programs sometimes are not. And so I think we saw that there could be value in not incurring a $20,000, $30,000 master's degree program fee, and that you could still be a better teacher when all was said and done. Bo, do you remember that conversation? Do you want to add any of your recollection to that whole notion?
Yeah, I think you captured it pretty well. I mean, I think the feeling is we recognize this accomplishment, and there's no real stipulations around what exactly that pathway for a master's looks like, what university or accredited institution you go down. And if we're really interested in incentivizing progress towards impact on kids, quality of teaching, why not look at some of our own internal offerings that we can offer for far less and provide multiple kind of targeted pathways for people, interests aligned to district goals, initiatives would be something worth doing in the future. So I don't know where the committee took it after I left, but I certainly remember those discussions and felt like in the room there was some feeling that it had real value to consider that.
Thanks, Bo. Yeah, so that's why we wanted to keep it up there, top of mind. Allison nailed it, well, this group gets to go past masters, but what about the rest of the system? And that's the question that we really need to continue to look at and think about.
Dave, did you have your hand up and I missed it? I saw you move.
I did. I also didn't want to dominate the conversation. I think it's been an interest of mine and others to really question whether or not, to recognize the master's degree as a value add to the system, but also ask the question, should it be the only way to move across the salary schedule as we're trying to recruit and retain teachers and dealing with the pay, in a low funding situation? Should we be asking people to accrue tens of thousands of dollars of debt to get across the salary schedule? It's been a while since we ran these numbers, but you have to be in the system a long time after your master's degree to pay off the master's degree. And for a large chunk of our staff, they're not here long enough to ever actually see the financial benefits from the master's degree. And so, it has been an interest of mine to create an alternative pathway that is still valuable, that is still a value add to the system that we can all feel good about, but allows greater access without having to accrue the debt that goes along with it. We've all read about the debt crisis in America, and we're going to be in a more competitive space for teachers on the other side of this recession again, because I don't have a crystal ball for many things, but the one crystal ball I do have is that there's going to be less people going into teaching than there were before after this recession, after seeing everything going on with decreased funding and everything we've had to do the last few months. And so we're going to be in a more competitive space. And so how can we put ourselves in a more competitive space for teachers, especially those new teachers in the system moving forward? And so this is definitely an area that I have, and I think others have been very vocal that we need to do more work in.
Anything else on this? So Mila, your plan is to bring it back tomorrow with some possible contract language. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else on this? All right. You're down to about 20 minutes. Is there anything else we can do today that we can move forward to, or do you want to do the checkout and have a half hour or so to yourself? What's the
Could we
pleasure of the
do a
group?
quick, could we do a quick update of tomorrow's agenda so we make sure we capture
Yeah.
what needs to be in there?
That's a good idea. Thanks, Jim.
So what I would recommend as our agenda, it's kind of what we have on the posted notice, would be we start with any additional comments or questions or additions to the SEL TOSA special service provider language. And if we're all good with that still, then we would ratify that first off. Then Mila would walk us through any recommendations on the conversation around the language. I would suggest then we break up into small groups to discuss it and start working our process about how to tackle this, adding or subtracting this into language. So I think there's some conceptual things that people just need to have time to discuss and then talk story, interests, and options on as to make sure that we're going down a path that everyone feels comfortable and good with. And we go as long as that, as long as it takes, or as long as we have on that process, to see if we can get to a place of consensus tomorrow on that language. Obviously, if there was, the legislator gave us some miracle of knowledge, or the governor's office on clarity, I would ask Chris or Susie to bring that to us, but I don't have a lot of hope that that's going to happen in the next 23 hours.
Dave, I think we were talking about maybe beginning story and interests on compensation issues, but I don't know how realistic that is given the giant question marks that we've got in place.
Well, we had been hopeful that the School Finance Act or even the long bill would have been introduced on Saturday or Friday, which, because they shut down because of the protests, that did not even happen. So we don't even have a starting place to have that conversation. Now, like I said, if they do introduce it today, then in the next 23 hours and give us some clarity, that might be beneficial. I just have reservations about even walking down that path without having at least one of the big chunks we need talked about, or more than just a guess, I should say.
So with that, I don't know that tomorrow's session would be a full 4 hours at all.
There's a chance of that, yeah.
I'm guessing it might just be a couple. And I'm guessing that we would sort of stay loose with our commitment to the 8th and see what the coming days of this week bring in terms of any kind of firmer information, and be ready for me to reschedule the 8th and the 9th to some later point in June, although it can't go too much later, but I mean, it just, yeah. I think that's the reality of where we are right now.
I agree. The other thing I'd put into people's space is, because we can't push this much further. I mean, we can push it a little bit, right? We have some time, but we don't have loads and gobs of time. We also are going to need to potentially start thinking about how do we draft up if-then statements for the different options and scenarios that Susie and others have put forward. And if this happens, then this happens kind of space, because we need to give the district and the system enough time to react to whatever pieces, and also honoring all of our time, since we're all supposed to be doing other things right now.
Yeah, and I really appreciate those of you who are off contract here with us. It's always a sacrifice to ask you to step away from your duties, but now we're asking you to step away from your own time. And so that's an extra commitment. And Dave and I are really want to be very respectful of, reserving 4 hours of your morning and then not using it well. And we want to avoid that. We want to avoid not using it well. And we want to, maintain our forward momentum as best we can. So we're just, I think, being a little transparent about the struggle we're having right now.
Yeah, and you're not alone in that. Every district's running through the same thing, guys. So Jim and I have seen that in a couple of other areas as well. So question for you, if you're not anticipating the 4 hours, do you want to keep the same start time and then just end when it ends? Or do you want to push the start time back? What's your pleasure there?
I would prefer to start on time and end early. That's that way we can, if it takes us 4 hours, it takes us 4 hours. If it takes us less than 4 hours, we still have 4 hours if we needed them. Yeah. I would much rather do it that way.
Okay, that sounds good, Dave. I see Dorman clapping down there. So.
Yeah, I think for all our sleepy heads, that's hard. But, if we get going on something, we want the time to be able to really pursue it through its full 4 hours. So
I know 2 elementary school age kids that'd be more than glad to make sure that you're awake at any time in the morning that you would like to be up beforehand.
Yeah, I can only imagine, Dave. No, I just wanted clarity. I just wanted to make sure. So,
yeah.
So anything else for today?
I don't think so. I think we could do the checkout and
okay.
Wrap early.
Kathy does have a question.
So I'm just trying to get my head around the stories, interest, options, what we're going to be doing. So part of the story is just uncertainty, right? So and I agree with not going in to doing it when we have more information. I'm wondering about, I know there's a team that's doing trying to find out if various scenarios of use of the COVID money is acceptable. Poor Chris got an email from me at 6 a.m. on Saturday because I had an idea. I'm hoping he didn't read it at that time. I'm sure he did not. I'm wondering if, and I haven't, of course, asked Chris about saying this yet, but what I would want to make sure is if people have creative ideas of how to use the COVID money, that we get those in advance so those can be vetted so we know if they're options. So I don't know if CEA has been working on different ideas to say, is this a way you could try and get, I guess what I'm saying is I want all options on the table that we know would be possible. One of my idea had to do with, furlough days and maybe back pay for if teachers, we might have to do furlough days, but then paying teachers anyway for some ways of doing that. But it feels like there could be some options that we could come up with that we don't know would be possible, and to get some pre-vetting if people have ideas. But I don't know how Chris feels about that. I know they have a team looking at that, but I just want every creative possibility for using that money for staff that's out there.
I think that would be, I'd be more than glad if that's something that Chris or others would find valuable. The only suggestion I would have, if that's something we want to spend time doing tomorrow, is that we do that in breakout groups and then kind of submit the list, right? Like I don't necessarily want the whole world to be watching us come up with ideas that don't pan out or have any legal standing to that space. And it might be a more quick, efficient way of if we're just gathering ideas from folks. I don't know, Mila or Chris, if you, how you would react to that, or
Well, and
That's-
we would even, we could do it as part of this process, or we could have them gathered. Again, I just don't know what's been talked about in different circles, what's been proposed by other districts, but I really want to be able to use that money.
Yeah. I think there's agreement on that, Kathy, for sure. But I think that even it's the same thing I just said a minute ago about just the state of the long bill and the Senate's allocations to us. We are so in the dark about exactly the ways in which we may be allowed to use that money that I fear that any time spent with this group brainstorming, well, maybe we could spend it on this, maybe we could spend it on that, might be a little futile, because a similar lack of clarity exists as I understand it. And Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we might be brainstorming ideas that just have no possibility of being accepted. And that's not the best use of our time either. Although there's certainly a need to capture as many creative ideas as we can.
Chris, you want to weigh in?
Sure. I think the point Mila just made is a helpful one, that there's just a remaining a lot of uncertainty and quite a few barriers about how we might use funds. And so that's a starting place. The second piece is using it's important. And I'm sure we can find creative ways to use it. The concern I have is if we can't use it to supplant some other expenditures, which seems to be the perpetual thing, then we've got a big honking hole to fill in and figure out. And so trying to figure out how to spend money, which is often doing new things and spending, adding new staff or new programs at the same time that we're having to whack 18 million or some huge number, will pose some challenges. And it just feels like I'm going to remain optimistic about people allowing these funds to be spent in the spirit that I believe they were intended. But part of what I got from Susie after she did her part today was some Treasury Department guidance that says you have to use the money for a cost that's substantially different from anything that you're currently spending on. And it even goes on to say that a public function does not become a substantially different use merely because it is provided from a different location or through a different manner. For example, although developing online instruction capabilities may be a substantially different use of funds, online instruction itself is not a substantially different use of public funds than classroom instruction. It just feels like time and time again, they're trying to tighten this down. So it's challenging. I think where Mila started is just a helpful thing. I could see our team doing some work to brainstorm potential uses, but I think having hopefully some more permissive guidance about how we can use those funds in the next few days will allow us to use that time most wisely. And in the meantime, for everyone to be doing some mental brainstorming and jotting down ideas. And then there might be some group time that we can use later this week or into next to talk through that further.
Okay. Anything else? And Kathy, just for your information, and Dave, hopefully you won't kick me for saying this. Yes, CEA is working constantly to try to put pressure on the legislature, put pressure on the feds to use the money for what we need to use it for. So we get daily updates on the stuff that they're doing. Our GR team is working unbelievable hours trying to push the legislature. So Dave, I don't have any more than that, but do you have any specifics that you want to share?
No, I think to your point, I mean, every district is asking for basically the same thing. And, everything from the Rural Alliance to CASB, every single group is asking for the exact same thing and is going to be unaccepting of anything less than that. I'm in Chris's space. I think we're going to get more permissive guidance. I keep getting put on all these calls with all these different people to make a case for it. And at the end of the day, they're all saying the same thing of, we're all just trying to figure out how to do it. We don't know how to do it yet. Just give us some more time to figure out how to do it. And we're all saying, we don't have any more time for you to figure it out. Just do it. So I think the end result is everybody, at least in Colorado, I can't speak to certain other city locations, are all trying to do the same thing. It's just all of us are trying to figure out the right path to get it done in. So yes, that's the common thing I keep hearing from all the different legislators or group meetings that they keep Amy keeps asking me to show up on. So yeah, we're all pushing for the exact same thing, and I think we'll get there. It's just how fast and how helpful will it be?
Yeah. All right, anything else for the good of the order? I don't see any hands up in the participants box, so are we ready for checkout? Byla, Dave, are we ready for checkout? All right, so let's start checkout, just thought for the day, and we're gonna start with Linda.
Just the unsettled times makes for unsettled discussions and problem solving.
Sandy.
This kind of thing just always reminds me of PBLs in our STEM school. It's like the ultimate PBL, trying to solve this problem and has no solution right now.
Byla.
Yeah, I think just patience, and we'll get through it.
Matt.
Yeah, I just want to thank the groups that presented today with all the work they had done over the course of the year. Definitely much appreciated and good stuff there. And we'll just hold on tight.
Kathy.
Yeah, great work on the things that we can control, and we'll do good work on what we can't too.
Darren.
It's all about the team. We'll get through it together. And I agree with Matt. We appreciate the teams that have been working to help us out.
Laura Mitchell.
I just, I'm glad to be part of this group. And I think it is going to be challenging, so many unknowns and not able to predict what's going to happen in the future. But I think, I appreciate everybody in here will come with their best ideas and we'll get through it as a group.
Marty.
Yeah, times are definitely unsettled. I live in Denver. We've had the curfew for the last few days and it's been pretty noisy downtown. It's been kind of crazy. But it's nice to be able to come to a space and feel like I'm part of a group that's pulling in the right direction on something. So thanks.
Dave Lockley.
I just want to remind us that if we get this language done, the direction we're going, we're going to help 20 people have clarity and access to pay that they didn't have before. Our SEL TOSAs who are afraid about having their pay rolled back, and also our CTE teachers who have been sacrificing a lot to work with our kiddos. And so we're about to help 20 people, and that should feel good, right? Regardless of all the other unsettlements, that is an accomplishment by itself.
Laura Leppy.
I'm always impressed and amazed by how many moving parts there are and how well everyone seems to come together, even though there's like things we don't know about and stuff like that, and learning so many different things about so many different moving parts. And so it was kind of nice to have this like structure of today, even though I didn't like the 8 a.m. But I love you guys and I love the work that we do together. And I love being part of such a caring and committed group of people. So super awesome.
Nancy.
I would echo what pretty much everybody has said. The groups that have been working and brought us information today were amazing. This group is always amazing. I love how we work together. A little frustrated with the fact that we can't get the information we need from the state and the feds to be able to continue with our work. But other than that, great job.
Dorman.
I think we're doing good work. I think we're moving forward. I am a little bit frustrated with the, not knowing what we can do with the CARES money. Always in the past, it's like block grants, local control, let the states firm it and figure out how to do these things. But all of a sudden, in the pinch, it's like you can't use it for anything. So a little frustrated on that end. Has nothing to do with us, but we're doing really good with what we have control.
Heather Gracious.
Unprecedented times we're in, but we will get through it and figure it out. Thanks to everybody.
Chris.
Just truly appreciative of our committee work. I was thinking back to probably 4 years or so ago, pre-Mila, when we worked on CTE salary schedule stuff as a broader team, and it was hours and hours and hours, and it wasn't nearly as technical as the work that the committee did. And so I think as a team, we're learning how to have our committees do more effective work and use our time for other things. That's very productive. So feeling good about that.
Colleen.
I'm super appreciative of all the work that we got done today. I'm kind of sad that if we get information, then we can move forward, because it feels unsettled, and that's not a happy place to be.
Bo.
Yeah, I echo the appreciation for the committee work. I think the depth and efficiency that structure provides is pretty obvious, to Chris's point. And yeah, I get the frustration, but I also understand that if I was a state senator or state legislator, I extend them some grace too. I mean, given what's going on at their place of work right now and in the country as a whole, I think we can all understand that things aren't as efficient and timely as we'd like them to be, but this team has what it takes, and we'll deliver.
Heather Espinoza.
Yeah, I just agree. A lot of great work, a lot of good information that we got today, and we'll just keep waiting for those unknowns to become known.
Shelley.
Yeah, I think today it was obvious that we have a really good structure for getting good information from the people who really know their stuff. I mean, I'm glad that CTE people and work was done to figure out information from the SELs to help us inform our decisions. I just think as I work on this committee or this team, it's really helpful to have those committees who spend the hours and the time invested in figuring out how to move us forward in the best direction. So I feel really grateful that today we had a lot of expert ideas and input and information to help us form our decision.
Deborah.
First of all, thank you for letting me step away to take care of some stuff. I appreciate it. Sounds like I have some catching up to do and some reading to do, but I look forward to problem solving and working through everything with this team. Thanks.
Teresa.
I just want to say I appreciate the spirit and perseverance of our group, and Dave really luckily put things in perspective of, the work that we did today and how it's beneficial to those people. I really did enjoy hearing the information presented, and it's helpful. And I thank you for everybody's hard work, and hopefully everybody has a great week.
Allison.
Similar, just, yeah, I too share both the frustrations and am very grateful for the work that everyone does, and the fact that we actively bring in voices that are not on the team to get their expertise involved in the discussions that we have. I love that we do that.
Jim.
So 1968, I found myself with 400 of my best friends, and we agreed we didn't like where we were at. We had different ways of expressing that. I don't think anybody's happy with where they're at now, but we'll persevere and we will solve these problems.
Yeah, good work today, everybody. Laura Mitchell, my heart goes out to you. My parents went through the same thing. I know exactly what you're going through, so you're in my thoughts and prayers. Great job today, folks. You do good work, and you will get there. The information will come, and we will finish. So we will see you all tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock then.
And I just want to say thanks to Roddy and Chad, our new tech support people. Thank you, gentlemen, for supporting us through today's fun.
Yep, sounds good.
Hey, Roddy, when we're done being live, can I ask you a question?